Third wave, second wave wasn't a big problem. Third wave comparatively is a bit more, difficult. കുറച്ചൊരു tools കൂടുതലുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. And it basically solved because of all unpredicted and unprecedented issues of the virus. That's how the pandemic is.
Okay. Ando? Ando?
Yes, Acha.
Yeah, like maybe we can start.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can start.
3 minutes, or should we wait for another 3 more minutes?
We can wait.
We'll wait for 1 minute, so we can then start.
I think we'll wait for three more minutes. Now, like 6, 7. We will start at 6:10.
Sure, Acha. Sure.
അവിടെ സ്കൂളും കോളേജൊക്കെ ഇപ്പൊ എങ്ങനെയായിരുന്നു വെച്ചാ
സ്കൂള് നമുക്ക് എല്ലാം 1.5 years ആയിട്ട് എല്ലാം ക്ലോസ്ഡ് ആണ്. എല്ലാം നമുക്ക് ഓൺലൈൻ ക്ലാസ്സസ് ആണ്. കോളേജ് ഒക്ടോബർ വരെയൊക്കെ ഓരോ ബാച്ചസിനെയൊക്കെ വെച്ച് നമ്മൾ ഒരു കുറച്ച് കുട്ടികളെ വെച്ച് ആ ഒരു സിസ്റ്റം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. പക്ഷെ ഒക്ടോബറിൽ കുറച്ചുകൂടെ കൂടുതലായിട്ട് സ്പ്രെഡ് ആകാനൊക്കെ തുടങ്ങിയതുകൊണ്ട് വീണ്ടും നമ്മൾ എല്ലാവരെയും ഇപ്പം എല്ലാവരും മീൻസ് ഈവൻ നോൺ ടീച്ചിങ് സ്റ്റാഫും വർക്ക് ഫ്രം ഹോം ആക്കി, നമ്മുടെ അഡ്മിനിസ്ട്രേഷനും. ഇപ്പം ലൈക്ക് ഒരു നവംബർ മുതൽ ആ ഒരു രീതിയിലാണ് മൊത്തം ക്ലോസ്ഡ്. നവംബർ ഒക്കെ ഞാൻ പോകുന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഇപ്പം മാർച്ചിൽ എനിക്കും പോകാൻ പറ്റുന്നില്ല, കാരണം കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ക്ലോസ് ചെയ്തു. കാരണം നമ്മുടെ കുറച്ച് സ്റ്റാഫിനൊക്കെ കോവിഡ് വന്നു. ഈവൻ എനിക്ക് കോവിഡ് വന്നായിരുന്നു ലാസ്റ്റ് നവംബറിൽ. ഞാൻ ടെമ്പറേച്ചർ ഒക്കെ കൂടുതലായിരുന്നു, അപ്പം അപ്പോളോയിൽ അഡ്മിറ്റ് ആയിരുന്നു. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു മാസം ഞാൻ അഡ്മിറ്റ്. അതിനുശേഷം ഞാൻ പോസ്റ്റ് കോളേജിൽ പോകാൻ തുടങ്ങി. പക്ഷെ ഇപ്പൊ മാർച്ചിൽ വന്നപ്പോഴത്തേക്കും കുറച്ച് കൂടുതൽ ആൾക്കാർ കോവിഡ് വന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ട് ഇപ്പൊ എല്ലാം ഇവിടുന്ന് വർക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, പള്ളിയിൽ നിന്ന്. ലാപ്ടോപ്പിൽ നെറ്റ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ലൈക്ക് നമുക്ക് ഈ ആൾക്കാരെ ഫേസ് ടു ഫേസ് കണ്ട് വർക്ക് ചെയ്യും. നമ്മുടെ വർക്കുകൾ അങ്ങനത്തെയാണല്ലോ. ഇത് ഈ ഓൺലൈനിലൂടെ പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുമ്പം പിന്നെ അതിന്റെ ഫോളോ അപ്പ് ഒക്കെ ലിറ്റിൽ ഡിഫിക്കൽട്ട്. നമ്മൾ പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്ന ഫാസ്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് ഔട്ട്പുട്ട് കിട്ടത്തില്ല. IT-ലൊക്കെ ആ ഒരു സിസ്റ്റം വെച്ചിരിക്കുവാണല്ലോ. നമുക്ക് ഈ സിസ്റ്റം ഇപ്പം നമ്മൾ ജസ്റ്റ് ഇതിൽ കയറിയതല്ലേ ഉള്ളൂ.
Good afternoon, Saloj.
Hey, John. Good afternoon. How are you? Okay, ജോണും ആന്റിയും എല്ലാരും ഉണ്ടല്ലോ.
Fine.
എല്ലാരും സുഖമാണല്ലോ.
പിള്ളേരെങ്ങനെയുണ്ട്?
പിള്ളേർ കുഴപ്പമില്ല, സുഖമായിട്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. ഇവിടെ എവരുടെയും സ്കൂളൊക്കെ ഓൺലൈനാ. പക്ഷെ സ്കൂളിൽ ഇനിയും അവരുടെ അക്കാഡമിക് ഇയർ തീരാറായല്ലോ ഓൾറെഡി. So it's almost like end of the year. ഇവിടെ end of June, പിന്നെ they open up in September. അപ്പോൾ എല്ലാം ഓൺലൈൻ. പിള്ളേരെല്ലാം ഇപ്പോൾ യൂസ്ഡ് ആയില്ല. Children's got used to all this online teaching and sessions. Teachers got used to it, and എല്ലാവരും ഇപ്പം getting used to the new normality. That is a new normality, no? The new normality is like so you're getting used to that.
Okay. So, Ando, shall we begin?
Yes, Father, we can start. So over to Jismi and Dingsha.
Okay. A hearty welcome to everyone who has joined the webinar. Requesting everyone to stay on mute until and unless asked. Hello everyone. നമുക്കെല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയുന്നത് പോലെ ഇന്ന് നമ്മൾ പെന്തിക്കോസ്തി ദിനം ആചരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ ഒരു അനുഗ്രഹപ്പെട്ട ദിവസത്തിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഓൺലൈൻ വേദിയിൽ ഒരുമിച്ച് കൂടാൻ സാധിച്ചതിന് ദൈവത്തിന്റെ ഒരു വലിയ കൃപയാണെന്ന് കാണുന്നു. എല്ലാവർക്കും പെന്തിക്കോസ്തി ദിനത്തിൽ എല്ലാ നാമങ്ങളും പ്രാർത്ഥനകളും നേരുന്നു. സുഭാഷിതങ്ങൾ 16:3 പറയുന്നു, നിന്റെ പ്രവൃത്തികളെ യഹോവയ്ക്ക് സമർപ്പിക്കുക, എന്നാൽ നിന്റെ ഉദ്ദേശങ്ങൾ സാധിക്കും.
Hello and a very happy evening to everyone who has gathered here. It is with great pleasure that we, on behalf of the Chennai Thari MCYM unit, welcome you all to the Co-Vactalk, a live webinar on COVID vaccination and its subsequent updates, presented by the MCYM of St. Thomas Malankara Syrian Catholic Church, Pari, Chennai, in association with Mar Gregorios College of Arts and Science, Mogoper, Chennai.
So, as you all know, today's event is a live interactive session on COVID vaccination and other latest updates. We, the Party unit, have created a platform for you all to interact, know, and gain knowledge about everything regarding COVID vaccine. Without further ado, let's get into the event.
പല സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലായിരിക്കുന്ന നമ്മൾ എല്ലാവരും ഈ പ്ലാറ്റ്ഫോംസിൽ ഒരുമിച്ച് കണക്ട് ചെയ്യുവാൻ സാധ്യമായതിൽ ഒരു വലിയ അനുഗ്രഹമാണ്. COVID-19 വാക്സിനെ കുറിച്ചും ആ രോഗത്തെക്കുറിച്ചും നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എല്ലാ സംശയങ്ങളും ഉത്തരം ലഭിക്കുവാൻ ഞങ്ങൾ ഇതാ ഈ വേദി ഒരുക്കിയിരിക്കുന്നു. ആദ്യമായി സ്വാഗത പ്രസംഗം പറയുവാൻ മിസ് റിയ വർഗീസിനെ ക്ഷണിച്ചുകൊള്ളുന്നു.
Good evening, everyone. On this occasion, I'd like to share a quote of Jean Vanier. One of the wonderful things about the community is that it allows us to welcome and help people in ways that we couldn't as individuals. With that said, it's my pleasure to welcome everyone who has taken the time to connect with us today through Zoom and YouTube. Despite the challenging circumstances, I'm overjoyed to see you all. On behalf of MCYM Party, Chennai, I cordially invite you to Co-Vactalk, a live interactive session about the COVID-19 vaccine and its most recent update, presented by MCYM Party in collaboration with Mar Gregorios College of Arts and Science, Mogaper, Chennai. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome our most ardent supporters, our respected Vicar and Co-Vicar of St. Thomas Malankara Syrian Catholic Church, Padi, Father Philip Pulipara and Father Monsi Kalikal, as well as the respected Father Maria Sobu, the Vicar of St. George Church, Ayapakam, and all our dear sisters. I also welcome Father Soju Thomas. I warmly welcome our speaker, an eminent and an astute individual, Dr. Sanoj Matthew Chaku, the Cardiac Electrophysiology Fellowship Director. He is also a consultant cardiologist and an electrophysiologist at Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. He was an active member of our church. We cannot think of a more eligible person to address all our concerns. Thank you for accepting our invitation and joining us today. Recognizing the need of the hour, we, the MCYM, are pleased to have provided you with a forum to address all of your questions and concerns about COVID vaccine. I wish everyone a successful and fruitful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ria Varghese. I welcome our respected Father Philip Pulipra to felicitate the gathering with a prayer.
Thank you, Linsha. Father John Peter, you are there?
Yes, Father.
Yeah, so I too welcome Father John Peter, who is the Dean of Master Social Work of Mar Gregorios College of Arts and Science, and you know that he was our HOD of the department, and plus he was the one of the senior. He is one of the senior staff of the college. So may I invite Father John Peter to say a word of prayer for the intention of this talk as well as for the general intentions. Please, Father.
Dear Reverend Fathers, Dr. Matthew, and my dear brothers and sisters, I greet all of you in the mighty name of our Lord Jesus Christ. He has called all of us together, and let us now thank Him for all the graces He's been showering upon us, for having been protecting us, providing us, and for taking care of us. My dear brothers and sisters, even before we start praying, let us have a small reflection. Now, we are all very much disturbed by this COVID, because everywhere we hear about this and we have no words to give any consolations to them. We are tired of listening all such news. Sometimes we get questions, why all this? Why? Then our doubt sometimes, the situation is so heavy that this doubt will lead us, is there God at all? My dear brothers and sisters, He is very much alive, active. He is with us, in us. Please know that this is not coming from God at all. Any temptation, trial, pain, agony, sufferings, He doesn't give because He is full of goodness only. No evil can come from Him, but He permits all this. Why does He permit? Sometimes in order to strengthen or deepen our faith, or perhaps sometimes we will be running far away from Him. When everything goes well, we forget about Him. In our happy moment, we forget Him. Only when we are suffering, we come running to Him. So maybe this is an opportunity for us to come back to Him, and sometimes to test our faith, sometimes to correct us with a small punishment. So it is not coming from God, but there's a purpose when He permits this. Dear brothers and sisters, instead of now blaming God or even doubting God, let us totally surrender ourselves at His holy feet. Today, one doctor was telling me, Father, please inform your people that neither Prime Minister, nor Chief Minister, or any other leaders, or even doctors or nurses, or any scientist, nobody can save you. Only you can save yourself. You just shut down the doors and remain at home. But we Christians, we firmly believe that we have somebody to help us, somebody to save us from this situation. He holds the power. Just a minute, please. I'm sorry. So let us place our total trust and let us surrender ourselves at the holy feet of Jesus Christ. He is our Lord and Master. He is master of everything. He is author of everything. He gives life. He has authority to take life, or He has authority to give it back to us. God of our Father, we thank You. We praise You. We worship You. And we adore You for this wonderful webinar. Abba Father, it was not our plan. It is Your plan that we must come together like this and be enlightened by Your beloved Son, Dr. Matthew. Abba Father, You have promised us, for I will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. It is He who is our light and lamp, the Lord my God, light in our darkness. You will not fear the terror of the night, or the arrow that flies by the day. No evil shall befall you, no scourge come near your tent. For I will command my angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your feet against the stone. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent will trample under your feet. My presence will go with you. Abba Father, thank You for wonderful promises, Father. To whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. You chose us, you called us, you chose us even before we were formed in the womb of our mother. You called us by name and you written our names on the palm of your hands. You said, you are mine. Even if your mother forgets the suckling child, I will never forget you. I will gather you under my wings. I will protect you as the apple of my eyes. I'm always looking at you. I will give everything you want, Abba Father. With these promises, we trust in you, Father. We surrender the entire humanity at your holy feet. We ask you pardon for all those moments we ran away from you, Father. This is a big lesson, Father, for all of us to come back, to give up our sinful way of life. Abba, Father, we will never once again go away from you, Father. Give us the strength, Father, so that we always be with you in your presence. We feel your presence within us, and that we get protected and encouraged by you. Abba, Father, bless Dr. Matthew. Inspire him, enlighten him with your Holy Spirit, that he imparts the same wisdom and knowledge that he got from you to us. He is carrying on this wonderful ministry. Healing ministry is your ministry, and you have shared this ministry with Dr. Matthew, and he has been carrying out this ministry for years together. Abba Father, today he is with us. Bless him, bless his family, bless him with a long, healthy, happy, and holy life. Let him be inspired to explain all the doubts that we all have got. Abba Father, use his tongue, use his mind, use his heart to speak to us, Father. Through him, we believe that it is you who heal people, you who console people, you who counsel people. Abba Father, make him as best instrument. I also pray for all the priests over here, Abba Father. People all come to us, Father. They come to us seeking for your healing power. Abba Father, they take all the priests to be your true representatives or another Christ. Abba Father, today many priests, nuns, pastors are dying, Father. Abba Father, heal all of them, Father. We also pray for all the participants, all our parishioners, all our college faculty members and students. Many have been affected, many are not with us today. We pray for the repose of souls of all those our beloved brothers and sisters who have gone to your abode, Father. Abba Father, bless them, give them your eternal peace. Bless all those people who have lost their loved ones, Father, and perhaps sometimes they were the support, total support of the entire family, Father. Fill the gap in those family, Abba Father. Console them, counsel them, and give them your wisdom and knowledge to understand the real meaning of this suffering, Father, and come to you totally trusting in you, Father. Bless all the participants here. Let us become your messengers of peace, your messengers of good news. Now, after attending this webinar, make us your instruments. We will spread the same message that we listen from Doctor to all those who have doubts and all those who are suffering, infected, or serving the infected people, Father. I pray to you to shower your graces upon all of us. Bless us with your love, joy, and peace in their families also, Father. May Almighty God bless all of us, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God bless you all.
Thank you, Father Dr. John Peter, for that beautiful prayer and invoking God's presence amidst us. So without wasting much time at the outset, let me take the privilege to appreciate MCYM party. Now, like we have come together today, 112 people are there. Like even that, like so it's like around 300-350 people are here together, because Padi Palile oru 60-65 families under. That means around 350 people are present here for this webinar as of now. സോ ഈ ഒരു മീറ്റിംഗിലേക്ക് നമ്മൾ വന്നിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ ഇതിന് പിന്നിൽ MCYM പാടി എന്നുള്ള നമ്മുടെ യുവജന സുഹൃത്തുക്കളുടെ ഒരു വലിയ ഹാർഡ് വർക്ക് ഉണ്ട്. സോ ഒരു പാരിഷ് പ്രീസ്റ്റ് എന്ന രീതിയിൽ, പാടിയിലെ വികാരിയച്ഛൻ എന്ന രീതിയിൽ ഈ ഒരു ഇനിഷ്യേറ്റീവ് എടുത്ത നമ്മൾ ഒരു മാസമായിട്ട് ഈ കുട്ടികൾ ഇതിന്റെ ഒരു പ്ലാനിങ്, പ്രിപ്പറേഷൻസ്, എക്സിക്യൂഷനിലൊക്കെയാണ്. ഇവര് വളരെ നന്നായിട്ട് നമ്മുടെ MCYM പ്രസിഡന്റ് ടോം, ആനിമേറ്റർ ആൻഡോ, ഇവരുടെയൊക്കെ നേതൃത്വത്തിൽ വളരെ ഭംഗിയായി ഈ കാര്യങ്ങൾ അറേഞ്ച് ചെയ്തു. നിങ്ങളുടെ പാരിഷ് പ്രീസ്റ്റ് ആയിരിക്കാൻ ഐ റിയലി പ്രൗഡ്. എനിക്ക് ഒരു അഭിമാനം തോന്നുന്നു നിങ്ങളുടെ ഈ പാടി MCYM-ന്റെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങളുടെ കൂടെ ആയിരിക്കാൻ. സോ അറ്റ് ദ ഔട്ട്സെറ്റ് ഇവരെല്ലാം ഈ നമ്മുടെ കൂടെ ഇരിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവരുടെയും അനുവാദത്തോടുകൂടി I am appreciating MCYM Party for this wonderful initiative. And as Dr. Father John Peter rightly prayed for Dr. Sanoj, and he is here and he will be leading us with the right knowledge and exact proper guidelines. അതാണ് നമുക്ക് വേണ്ടത്. നമുക്ക് ഒത്തിരി ഇൻഫർമേഷൻസ് ഉണ്ട്. ഇൻഫർമേഷൻസ് ഒത്തിരി, നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും കോവിഡിനെ പറ്റി അറിയാം, കോവിഡിന് വന്നാൽ കഴിക്കേണ്ട മെഡിസിൻസ് അറിയാം, എന്തൊക്കെ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കണം എന്നറിയാം. പക്ഷെ എക്സാക്ട് നോളജ് ആർക്കെങ്കിലും അറിയാവോ? നമ്മുടെ നോളജ് അതോറിറ്റേറ്റീവ് ആണോ, അത് വേരിഫൈബിൾ ആണോ എന്നൊക്കെ ചോദിച്ചാൽ നമുക്കും കൺഫ്യൂഷൻ ആയി. അതുകൊണ്ട് നമുക്കുള്ള ഡൗട്ട്സ് ഒക്കെ ഒന്ന് ക്ലിയർ ചെയ്യാണ്. നമുക്ക് അറിയേണ്ട ചില ബേസിക്സ് കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് ഡോക്ടർ സനോജ് കാനഡയിൽ നിന്ന് ഇന്ന് നമ്മോട് സംസാരിക്കുന്നത്. സോ വൺസ് അഗെയിൻ ഐ വെൽക്കം സനോജ്. സനോജ് വെൽക്കം ചെയ്യേണ്ട ആളല്ല, നമ്മുടെ ഫാമിലി മെമ്പർ തന്നെയാണ്, പാടി പാരിഷണർ ആണ്. സോ ലൈക്ക് അത്രയും ഒരു നല്ല പൊസിഷനിൽ കാനഡയിൽ ഇരുന്നുകൊണ്ട് ഞങ്ങളോട് സംസാരിക്കുന്നതിൽ വി ആർ വെരി ഹാപ്പി. ആൻഡ് താങ്ക് യു ഫാദർ ജോൺ പീറ്റർ ഫോർ ദ പ്രെയർ. ആൻഡ് a huge applause to Party MCYM and heartfelt welcome to all participants. And ഇവിടെ പ്രസന്റ് ആയിരിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാ അച്ഛന്മാരെയും, മോൻസി അച്ഛൻ, സോജു അച്ഛൻ, സ്റ്റീഫൻ അച്ഛൻ, ബാക്കി സിസ്റ്റേഴ്സ്, ഇന്ത്യയിൽ നിന്ന് പല സ്ഥലത്ത് നിന്ന്, ഇന്ത്യക്ക് പുറത്തു നിന്നൊക്കെ ഇവിടെ പ്രസന്റ് ആയിരിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാ ഫ്രണ്ട്സ്, റിലേറ്റീവ്സ്, ഫാമിലി മെമ്പേഴ്സ്, പാരിഷണേഴ്സ് എല്ലാവരെയും വെൽക്കം ചെയ്യുന്നു. ഗോഡ് ബ്ലെസ് യു.
Thank you, Father Philip Ulipra. I welcome Father Stephen John from Australia and Sister Narmalia for joining in this event. നമുക്കറിയാം നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടിൽ ഡോക്ടർമാർ വഹിക്കുന്ന പങ്ക് എത്രയുണ്ടെന്ന്, അല്ലെ? ഡോക്ടർമാർ ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ മനുഷ്യർ തന്നെ ഇല്ലെന്ന് പറയാം. ജീവന്റെയും മരണത്തിന്റെയും ഇടയിൽ കാക്കുന്ന സത്യദൂതന്മാർ തന്നെയാണ് ഇവർ. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു നല്ല ഡോക്ടറിനെയാണ് നമുക്ക് ഈ സെക്ഷനിലേക്ക് ലഭിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്.
I would like to introduce our speaker of the day. Today amidst us, we have an eminent speaker, Dr. Sanoj Matthew Chako, who serves as the Director of Cardiac Electrophysiology Fellowship. He's also a consultant cardiologist and an electrophysiologist at Queen's University, Ontario, Canada. He has completed his MBBS, MRCP in UK, CCT Cardio in UK, PhD in UK, and FRCP. He's a very active member of our church, MCYM, choir, and helping church in all possible ways. He and his brothers were the initial teams of MCYM in Pari Church. The strong foundation which they invested has grown them to this level now. Before the doctor takes over this session, there are few instructions to be conveyed, requesting everyone to stay on mute while the doctor's session is going on. Time will be allotted for you all to post your queries and your questions. Thank you. I would like to welcome Dr. Sanoj to take over the session.
Thanks, everyone. First of all, let me thank God for his providence and his blessings to all of us. Thank you for the kind introduction, Father Philip. Thank you for the kind prayers and blessings, Father John Peter. All is a very inspirational message from both of you. I know that most of you know me, but I've left Chennai almost like 20 years ago. And I worked in the UK for some time. I did my post-graduation in the UK. I'm a student of Sacred Heart, and I'm born and brought up and bred from St. Thomas Malangara Catholic Church. Um, I then moved to Canada, and currently I'm working as a cardiologist here. It was a great honor when I heard that you're conducting this program, conducting this webinar. And I'm so privileged to be part of you, and I'm always a part of you, as you know. But thank you for inviting me. When I do do a lot of talks, but when I thought of delivering this talk, I was wondering how best to pitch this talk. But as you know, that we are all going through a very difficult time, and since for the past 1.5 years, and we are all been overwhelmed by so many news, informations, medias, messages, and we all are fully updated. You know, everybody knows. You all know almost everything about COVID, and all what we talk about for the last 1.5 years is about COVID, its complications. And I know that a lot of people have gone through a difficult time. My heart goes to people who has and the relatives who have lost their life, and with deepest sympathy and prayers, I would like to pray that may their soul rest in peace. Without any further delay, I would like to move forward in my presentation. As a presenter, I would like to disclose that I don't have any conflicts of interest, and I'm not sponsored by any companies, and I don't have any intent to promote any manufacturer. But my intention of this presentation is to make you understand make you understand about COVID. You know, get the basics right, and then make sure that what we need to do to try and stop this pandemic. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, very clear.
Thank you so much. So, Acham Paranju, there are so majority of the people here are families. I do acknowledge and understand that. അപ്പം കുറച്ച് മലയാളത്തിലും ഞാൻ സംസാരിക്കാം. അതിൻ്റെ ആഗ്രഹമുണ്ട്. തമിഴിൽ സംസാരിക്കണമെങ്കിലും സംസാരിക്കാം. But my talk is primarily going to be in English. And
ഇത് വന്നോണ്ടാവോ അതുപോലെ
so my talk is going to be in English mainly, but I can clarify any of your doubts. Malayalamil ആർക്കെങ്കിലും എന്തെങ്കിലും clarify ചെയ്യണമെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ I'll be very happy to clarify in Malayalam. But let me take through this journey so that you all understand the importance of the disease, importance of how it manifests, and why it is so devastating. And then let's find out how we can stop it by different means. Okay. Now, this is the message of love, confidence, and hope. The message from the Director General of World Health Organization. So be safe, be smart, and be kind. And that is very important, especially when we are going through a extremely difficult time. Very difficult, you know, the pandemic has not only affected all of us physically, but also there is a lot of mental agony. So how, you know, it's very important to be more supportive and work together so that we can hold hands and then be together in difficult times, you know, and that is very important. So let's be safe. And I can't stress more than all what we all know, that, you know, it's very important that we wash our hands, social distancing, you know, the usual safety measures that we have been advocated, and we all follow that. And I would still, you know, strongly recommend and advise that that is something that we should continue to follow. Be smart and be vigilant, because there are a lot of messages that we get through the media. There are a lot of information we've been bombarded. We have to be really vigilant, and we have to be really thoughtful about what we take in. And it's very important that we act smart and, you know, try and limited knowledge is sometimes dangerous. You know, when we have more knowledge, that's when it becomes, you know, the let me get my 1 second. Okay, that's when it becomes very useful for everyone. Okay, and let's be kind to each other. Let's try and support each other during this difficult time. It's very important that we act fast without any regrets. It's because we cannot wait until things evolve. I cannot say that, okay, I'm going to wait until I have all evidence in hand. And we have to take the right step at the right time and move very diligently to win this game. That is the most important part of any victory in human life, you see. So this is my overview of my presentation. So why COVID is so devastating? I know that you all know about coronavirus, and I know you have been fully updated about the cause of death. The cause of death is predominantly because of an acute respiratory failure, because of acute respiratory distress, severe respiratory failure that happens suddenly. It's very devastating. And I'm not going to go through that again. I'm just going to go through the mechanism, why it happens, what happens, when you get admitted, what are the different stages of the disease, and what are the red flags. When I say red flags, it means that എപ്പോഴാണ് നമ്മൾ ഒരു phase from a self-limiting phase to a dangerous phase, and from dangerous phase to a catastrophic phase. So how do we recognize those three stages of disease, and how do we act well in advance? How do we act diligently to try and reverse a process that could potentially be reversible, during this process of the disease? And I'm going to update you with some evidence and updates on vaccines. We know that vaccines have a very long history of success, and right from decades ago, vaccine has been very successful, and vaccine have successfully stopped several life-threatening pandemics in the past. And we know that it works, and we know that the vaccine has been manufactured. There are very strict regulations in how to manufacture a vaccine, and there are very strict protocols to look at the safety aspects after manufacturing. So I'll go through that in detail when I come through the presentation as we go down, and why there is a hesitancy in having a vaccine. That is very important, timely information that we need to update, purely because when you are hesitant to do something, then you don't get the advantage of availing the best feasible medicine, or even healthcare that is currently prevailing. How vaccine can potentially stop the pandemic. And we know from history that vaccines have stopped several pandemics, and we know that vaccines are very important to get the herd immunity. When I say herd immunity, I just wanted to mention in Malayalam, the herd immunity in our body fighting mechanism. Body fighting mechanism can be developed either when you acquire an infection and you survive an infection, or it can be acquired by a vaccine, then you acquire the immunity from the vaccine. So there are two different ways. It's called herd immunity. Herd immunity varimbre. So that is when you stop your pandemic. So that is when the pandemic has got a potential to reduce mutation, has got the potential to be less virulent, and gradually this is going to end. This is not going to be an end game saying that, okay, this is going to end, say, tomorrow. This is going to end, say, next week or next month. No, this is going to take a time. This is going to take its time. But we have hope, and we have evidence that the vaccines have already, made a big difference in countries where they have been fully vaccinated. And in addition to all other measures that you always take, vaccines have made it very effective to bring down the pandemic. So this is how I see a pandemic is. So this is what a pandemic is actually. This is my definition of a pandemic. It is an invisible enemy. So before I go, I just wanted to, just 1 second, if please excuse me for a second. Okay, so it's can you all see my screen clearly? Is it clear?
Yes.
It's clear, okay,
Yes,
thank you. Okay, so why this is my definition of a pandemic, meaning that it's an invisible enemy. You don't know whom you're dealing with. You're actually dealing with something very much of very limited knowledge, or in fact, no knowledge at all whatsoever. So a pandemic why does a pandemic occur? A pandemic occurs just purely because we don't see what is in front of us. We don't see the enemy. When we don't see the enemy, we don't know what we're dealing with. When we don't see the danger, we don't know what we're dealing with. When we don't have the adequate knowledge or limited knowledge to deal with the danger, then that is a problem. And the enemy will take advantage. The enemy is a virus here. So the virus takes advantage, it creates mass casualties, and it depletes the resources. So this is the definition. A pandemic is an invisible enemy in whom we have a limited knowledge that has the ability to cause mass casualty and deplete all our resources. So we say that, okay, we don't have oxygen, we don't have hospital beds, we don't have ventilators, we don't have, that is not, that happens in anywhere and everywhere, that happens in any country. That is not because of the lack of infrastructure. Of course, there are some limitations in that. We may have some lack of infrastructure, but no matter which country you are, no matter wherever you are, how big of how your infrastructure is, and how much of facility you have, the virus can still deplete the resources. It can deplete all your resources. That is how the pandemic behaves. So there's no point in blaming anything. That is how the pandemic is. So that is why it is called as a pandemic, and that is how it destroys people's life. And that is very important for us to know. This is not the time to blame anyone. This is not the time to point fingers. This is not the time to look back and say we could have done this, we could have done that. No, this is the time to join hands. This is the time to say, okay, this is how the pandemic is, and there are this is how the pandemic has behaved everywhere in the world, and how people have joined hands together, how people have actually in the process, how people are in the process of conquering this virus, beating this virus. So that is very important for us to know. So pandemic is not something new. Pandemic so the pandemic has been there for several decades. If you look at on my left hand side of the screen, this is what you call as bubonic plague. So this occurred like in several centuries back, and you can see that the number of deaths was 200 million at that time. There was no medical facilities, there was no basic necessities, there was no proper healthcare system in place. And the bubonic plague at that time, the pandemic, that killed almost 200 million people, devastated. Similarly, look at the smallpox. The smallpox, killed almost like 56 million people. Now we know that the smallpox doesn't exist. The smallpox has been eradicated. So we know that. And if you look at more recent, in our like in 1918s, where our grandfathers, our grandparents have witnessed the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu has been devastating. The Spanish flu pandemic killed several millions, close to 50 million people. And that is one of our most recent witnessed pandemic. All our forefathers, all our grandparents are aware of that. We may not have been, some of us here may have seen it, but most of us are not even born at that time. But what is very important for us to know is that there is a known history. This is not something new. We are just witnessing one of the deadliest pandemic now. So if you look at the 2000 epidemic and pandemic, so you can see that there are several epidemics and pandemics that has occurred. Look at the swine flu, the SARS COVID virus in 2003 took several lives. Then the swine flu. Then you can see in 2012 the MARS, the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. Again, that killed quite a number of people. And the Ebola virus that's been devastating from 2014 to 2016. that originated from the African states, and that has been quite devastating, killed so many people. But now that Ebola doesn't, there's vaccination, and the virus itself, once you get Ebola or once you're vaccinated, you are free from getting this deadly disease for at least for 10 years. Now the present is coronavirus SARS-2. So the SARS-2 is different from coronavirus SARS-1 that you see here, is that it is much more deadlier. It is much more virulent, it's much more mutant, and it's much more devastating. And that is why you can see that there's a lot of casualties. There are a lot of deaths and complications as a result. And there are a lot of research going on, and things are gradually evolving. And the problem with the pandemic is that it comes in different waves. That is the danger of the sort of highly mutant and highly contagious virus. So we need to ensure that how measures, a lot of measures have been taken, like a lot of research, research not only in the treatment level but also in the prevention level has going on, not only just in the field of allopathy, but also with all due respect to all other specialties like Ayurvedam, Siddha, and so many natural medicines. And they've all been very thoughtful, very, very thoughtful and very informative about how we can, minimize or spread or minimize the infection rate, how we can boost your immunity. So a lot of at different levels, at different sectors, in a different, all different medical fields or other specialties have actually contributed significantly. And so I do respect and I do appreciate all the effort in all field to try and end this pandemic. Now, if you look at the evolution, I'm just going to briefly touch the evolution October 30 and to November 29, 2019. From 30th of October to 29th of November 2019, the first reported COVID-19 evolved, and then subsequently 30th of January 2020, the WHO declared as an unprecedented outbreak. And subsequently, on the 11th of March 2020, the WHO declared as a global pandemic. So this is a very important slide I want you to understand. So I'm going to talk a little bit in Malayalam here as well, so that everybody understands the basics of coronavirus. So we know that, it's named as SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 means it primarily affects your lungs. Okay, it causes a devastating sorry. So it causes devastating inflammation, inflammatory response to your lungs, and florid pneumonia. And then people unfortunately don't make it. So I just wanted to run through some basics about your normal respiratory system. So if you look at the picture here on the top, that is your normal lungs. This is our normal shashagosam. So what is happening here is that when we inhale oxygen, when we inhale the air, atmospheric air, the atmospheric air comes down through your main windpipe, then goes down through the branches. As you can see, it is like a tree. Yeah. So it branches out like a tree. And I would, call your attention towards the distal aspects of this little branches here. So those what we call as, what we call alveoli, where you have the capillaries. These tiny blood vessels are involved here, connected to this alveoli. So essentially in this picture, what I want you to know is that നമ്മുടെ lungs, നമുക്ക് രണ്ട് lungs ഉണ്ട്, right and left lungs ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പം നമ്മുടെ airways, this is our airways here. ഇതിനകത്ത് നമ്മൾ ശ്വാസിക്കുന്ന air comes through this one, and then it divides into branches. Okay, ഇതാണ് നമ്മുടെ normal lungs in the anatomy. This is how it looks. But I just wanted you to now focus on this little image here. So what is happening here? നമ്മുടെ ശ്വാസം എടുക്കുമ്പോൾ The air comes through, and this is the distal portion of your airways. What I see here, so that's a distal portion of your airways. So branches it will just go and end as this distal portion. This distal portion, end of your airways, is very, very important, because so what you see in red here is a small capillaries, and that is closely connected. That is, that is actually merged with what the distal part of the airways, what you call as an alveoli. So when you take a deep breath, when you take air in and out, what happens is the exchange of oxygen happens through this blood vessel. In the right side here, that is the blood vessel, and that is the air exchange in the alveoli. What happens is, it's called as the tiny capillaries. This capillaries are very, very small. It's very fragile. It's very tiny. So what happens is, as you can see, the oxygen, when you take a deep breath in, the oxygen goes into this small capillary. Okay, the small capillary, and then in exchange, you get carbon dioxide that comes from the lungs, and you just breathe it out. So when you take a deep breath, when you breathe normally, the air contains about 21% oxygen. Oxygen, then that is sufficient enough for people to lead a normal life. Then oxygen, the air comes down to the distal part. The oxygen goes in, is taken into these, and the carbon dioxide comes out. The capillaries, and the oxygen goes into rest of the body. The heart circulates. It is a combination of not the heart and the lungs functioning together in this mechanism. So when you take a deep breath in, the oxygen goes into this small capillary. So did I make it clear? So when you take a deep breath in, the air goes in down through this big branches here, and then goes all the way up here. And then as you come down, they're taking a small cross section of this little distal part of the airways, and that's where the oxygen exchange happens. These are small, tiny blood vessels that absorbs oxygen from the air that we inhale, and it takes back the carbon dioxide. And see that is again a cross section of this. So oxygen is going in. So this is very important for you to know. This is a very basic thing that will give you information about why the COVID is so devastating. Okay, can I move on? I'm going to move on now.
Yes,
okay?
yes, please.
Yes. Okay, so there are three phases. There are three phases. I would like to divide COVID into three phases. Okay, one is a self-limiting phase, and the second one is a dangerous phase, and the third one is a catastrophic phase. So self-limiting phase means that, as the word says, it's self-limiting. I'll go through each in detail so that we understand. Okay. So in a self-limiting phase, what happens is the coronavirus enters your body, and as soon as the coronavirus enters your body, we know that how it enters your body. When you're in close contact, when you don't maintain the social distance, or when you touch an object which contains corona. So the coronavirus enters the body, and once the virus enters the body, it has got the ability to multiply rapidly in millions in a very short span of time. It doesn't take too long. In a very short span of time, say 24 to 48 hours, you get millions of this virus in your body. And then that is the difficulty of this virus. It has got the ability to replicate, meaning that it can multiply very quickly. It will be like in your system pretty much in millions. So the body then, once you get so much of virus in your body, the body recognizes that there is an invasion. A body will then find, oh, there is somebody that is in my system. There is a danger to my body. So the body then recognizes the danger, and then what normally happens is the body fights. That is a natural thing. What the body does. Everybody has got inbuilt immunity. Everybody has got the ability to fight against any infection. So that is a God-given gift for every human beings, for every creatures in this world, that you have the ability to defend an infection. You have the ability to defend on anybody who is, who can offend you. So that is a natural protection that his body is given. So what the body does is the body will then respond to the invasion of the virus, and it will produce what we call as antibodies. Antibodies the body will create some chemicals that will work in favor of you. The antibodies that will fight against an infection. There are different types of antibodies. These antibodies will fight against the infection and help you recover from the infection. So this is like a normal viral infection. But നമുക്ക് ഒരു normal ആയിട്ട് ഒരു viral infection വരുവാണെങ്കിൽ, forget about corona. A normal viral infection the normal course is that ഒരു 4-5 ദിവസം നമുക്ക് പനി കാണും, നമുക്ക് ചുമ കാണും, നമുക്ക് ഒരു 4-5 ദിവസം കഴിയുമ്പം it will settle down. That is normally how we deal with viral infection. Antibiotics things doesn't work for a viral infection. But antibiotic only will work when the viral infection then creates a secondary infection. So viral infection, you get a bacterial infection on top of it. But antibiotic then will work to treat that bacterial infection. But antibiotic doesn't work with a viral infection. Normally, almost all the viral infections our body is fighting against an infection. Our body has got the ability to try and get rid of that infection. And that is again based on how strong you are, how your immunity is built up, whether you have any other comorbidities. Comorbidities, for example, when you have diabetes and hypertension, if you are obese, meaning that weight they are overweight, underlying medical conditions under. So all those will make your immune system weaker than a normal healthy people. ഒരു 20 വയസ്സുള്ള ഒരു 30 വയസ്സുള്ള ഒരു ആളെ പോലല്ല ഒരു 50 വയസ്സുള്ള ഒരു 60-70 വയസ്സുള്ള ഒരാൾ. It's because the natural behavior of the body is that as you grow older, your whatever that you have in your body, your tissues, your ability to think, your immune system, everything is gradually will undergo a wear and tear. ഒരു കാർ പോലെ തന്നെ, ഒരു കാർ ഇപ്പം 10 വർഷം ഓടി കഴിയുമ്പം കാർ നമ്മൾ വാങ്ങിക്കുന്ന പോലെ ആയിരിക്കത്തില്ല 10 വർഷം കഴിയുമ്പോൾ ഉള്ള ഒരു കാർ. So it is definitely it is the same scenario. As you grow older, and if you have too many comorbidities, like if you have diabetes or high blood pressure, what you see is that the immune system doesn't work very well, or immune system doesn't recognize infection as a normal person or as a healthy individual in certain circumstances. Normal condition, it's fine. A viral infection, if your immunity is a bit low, that doesn't matter too much, because you will then be able to gradually fight the infection with the help of some either other medical measures and things that we do. On the other hand, if you have a virus that is really strong, or if you have something that can attack you really badly, and if your immune system is not as healthy, then the virus will take the advantage. The virus will then try to defeat the person. The virus will then try to conquer your immunity, so that you don't have that ability to fight with the virus anymore. So self-limiting phase, it's a natural, normal course that the people will respond. 80%, fortunately, 80% of the people, 80% ആൾക്കാർ belongs to this group. So coronavirus, they just have an infection. You will see that symptoms they just get the infection but remain a silent carrier. They don't have any problems out of it. Temperature high temperatures, but a self-limiting phase when whatever in the initial phase where you are people who when the immune system works very well, when you're able to fight your invading virus well, often the disease settles in the first 5 to 6 days, in about 5 to 6 days. Sadharana virus pole. Okay, so fortunately 80% of the cases are like this. They all recover. You gain victory. So you then have to then follow the usual standard precautions, but you actually have succeeded the virus. So this is how, for a healthy individual, this is how the immune system works. If you look at this graph here, so here, imagine that's where the infection is. Okay, and I apologize that the words are not clear here, but I'll just take you through this picture. So that's where the infection is. When the infection occurs, what happens to the normal healthy people is that as soon as the infection is seen, your antibodies, your body start to recognize the infection, and it responds to it appropriately. So you see here, that's the virus, and that's the antibody response. So your antibody has recognized the virus, and the antibody, the body, നമ്മുടെ ബോഡിയുടെ എതിർപ്പ് ശക്തി ഉള്ള നല്ല എതിർപ്പ് ശക്തി ഉള്ളവർക്കാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ, so they respond. And then what happens is that the virus gradually then takes the phase down, and then the virus is eliminated. And if you look at your immune response here in blue, your immune response takes the curve, it defeats the virus. And that is the normal response. In about 5 to 7 days, that's what happens if you're a healthy individual, and that's what happens. And then you then get rid of the virus successfully. But again, you then follow the standard precautions of 14 days of quarantine. You test negative, and then you just then follow the routine precautions. But until after 14 days, you have to be in isolation. So what is the second phase called dangerous phase? So it is very important. E phase, people have to really understand this phase. Okay, normal at the first 5 to 7 days, or 5 to 6 days, people recover. 80% of the people recover, and then there is this 20% of the people who will go into a stage where your temperature doesn't settle down. You have continued cough. You have a dry cough. You go on to have a CT. You have evidence of lung infiltrates, and you see that you have unsettled fever, you're down, your temperature, you've got a bad headache. So things doesn't settle down. Okay, and you feel that you're going to be breathless. ശ്വാസമുട്ടൽ തോന്നിക്കും. അപ്പം അതൊരു you're transitioning from a stage of recovery to age of a dangerous phase, meaning that you should be able to recognize that phase. That is very important. Why that is important, I'll tell you in a minute. So when you have a weak, so why this happens? See, if you look at this graph here, so that is your virus. Okay, imagine you are infected. This happens in people who have a poor immune response, whose immunity is bad, whose immunity is poor. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മുടെ ഒരു ശരീരത്തിന്റെ ഫൈറ്റിംഗ് മെക്കാനിസം എതിർക്കാൻ ഒരു വൈറസിനെ എതിർക്കാനുള്ള ശക്തി കുറവുള്ള ആൾക്കാർക്ക്. അപ്പോൾ അതുപോലുള്ള ആൾക്കാർക്ക് എന്തുവാണ് പ്രശ്നം? പ്രായമുള്ള ആൾക്കാർ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അൺകൺട്രോൾഡ് ഡയബറ്റീസ് ഉള്ള ആൾക്കാർ, ഹൈ അതർ ലങ് ഡിസീസ് ഉള്ള ആൾക്കാർ, ഇതുപോലുള്ള ആൾക്കാർക്ക് ഒരു ആദ്യത്തെ എതിർപ്പ് ശക്തി, ആ ഡിസീസ് വരുമ്പം ആ ഡിസീസിനെ റെക്കഗ്നൈസ് ചെയ്യാൻ ഉള്ള റെസ്പോൺസ്, ആ ഡിസീസിനെ ആദ്യമേ തന്നെ ആൻറ്റിബോഡീസ് അപ്രോപ്രിയേറ്റ് ആയിട്ട് അത് ഡിറ്റക്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ആ ഇൻവേഷനെ റെക്കഗ്നൈസ് ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ആ റെസ്പോൺസ് കുറവായിരിക്കും. ഇഫ് യു ലുക്ക് അറ്റ് ഹിയർ, ദാറ്റ്സ് വെയർ ദി ഇൻഫെക്ഷൻ gets into, say, a person who is an elderly person, or somebody whose immunity is poor. And look at their immune response. The immune response doesn't build up like this. If the red line is a virus, and that's your immune response. If you see that the immune response is very slow here to recognize, so by the time the bodily immune system recognizes the virus is already down here. Okay, the virus takes advantage, meaning that the viral load starts to go up very quickly. So as I told you before, the ability of this virus is to try and replicate very quickly, try and multiply very quickly, take advantage of the weakness of a person. If somebody is weak, then the virus will take that as an advantage. When the immune system is weak, the virus takes that as an advantage. So when you have a poor immune system, when you have that poor response to the immune response to the virus, then what virus does is it starts to multiply very quickly. And as you see here, ഇവിടെ എന്തോ നടക്കുന്നതെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ the late response, ആ ഒരാഴ്ച കഴിയുമ്പം നമ്മുടെ body then suddenly wakes up and then will just give a boost of antibody. Antibody response, they release a lot of toxins called, that is normally protective in a normal amount. It's called cytokines. Rapid, there's an uncontrolled immune response here in response to an uncontrolled viral replication. So what happens is that you go into a phase where you become acutely breathless, you go on a ventilator, you then need to be, you become extremely sick. Then that's where the disease turns into a dangerous phase. Okay. So if you look at here, when you have a weak immune response, you have an uncontrolled viral replication. The virus takes the advantage. then you have a high viral load. When you have a high viral load, of course, and if your immune system is very weak, then you have the exaggerated antibody response. The exaggerated antibody response in the brain is very, very, that is what makes this disease very unpredictable. Because the exaggerated antibody response in the brain, nobody knows when this happens. Although we know that most of the people have this exaggerated antibody response, when we can predict to some extent that, if you have a kind of continued fever, if you have a cough, if you're going to be breathless, ശ്വാസമുട്ടലുണ്ട്, എനിക്ക് temperature settle ആവുന്നില്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എൻ്റെ ശ്വാസം എനിക്ക് ചുമ persistent ആയിട്ടുണ്ട്, even after 5 days or 6 days, it goes on, then what happens is that is when that is a sign of where you are at risk of having this exaggerated antibody response. That is a sign that the viral load is still high. So this is the next phase. This is called as a crucial phase. It's very important for us to know this. എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ ഞാൻ നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ 2 phase ഉണ്ട്. വൈറസിന്റെ ഒരു സെൽഫ് ലിമിറ്റിംഗ് phase ഉണ്ട്, first 5 to 6 days. Then it goes to a dangerous phase. This is a self-limiting phase. ഞാൻ നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ 80% ആൾക്കാർ will just have be in the self-limiting phase, and then other 15 to 20% will go into this dangerous phase. Is how to know how is it going to, how are you going to turn this, it can be either way. You can either turn on to your self-limiting phase, or you turn to the dangerous phase. So how will we know that, how is it going to turn? It's not easily predictable, but there are some warning signs. So I want you to know and understand some basic signs and some basic warning symptoms that may be helpful. Okay. So what are the reasons why I would recommend a hospital admission? എനിക്കറിയാം, കാരണം നമുക്കിപ്പം so if you have a temperature, if the temperature is, if you have a recurrence of temperature, അതായത് ആദ്യം ഒരു 5 ദിവസത്തിനകം you had a temperature വന്ന് സെറ്റിൽ ആയി, but അത് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് within the next 2 days 2 ദിവസം കഴിഞ്ഞ് പിന്നെയും high temperature വന്നു. So that is what is called as a recurrence of temperature. അങ്ങനെ when you have a recurrence of temperature, when the temperature doesn't settle down, so if you have a high spiking temperature, okay, and then I'm not talking about the first 5 days. First 5 days, most of the people will get better. We'll have to, you don't need to get admitted in the first 5 days unless you have any other problems. But what I'm trying to say here is that if things doesn't settle down, even after the normal, even after 5 days, if you have high temperature, if the temperature doesn't settle down, if you have a deep irritant cough, and if you have, if you have difficulty in breathing, or you don't necessarily need to have all these things. Even if you have difficulty in breathing, that is again a very important sign. എല്ലാവർക്കും എല്ലാ symptomsum വേണമെന്നില്ല. ചിലവർക്കാണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ it may be just a very deep irritant cough. For some people, difficulty in breathing is very, very, very is a very important warning sign. കാരണം എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ the symptoms and signs എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, so it depends on how healthy the people is. So some healthy people can tolerate a fight very easily when compared to a person who is unhealthy. For example, they can, what I mean to say is that not just fight, they can compensate. അതായത് ചില ഹെൽത്തി ആയിട്ടുള്ള ആൾക്കാരാണെങ്കിൽ അവരുടെ ശ്വാസമുട്ടലുണ്ടെങ്കിലും അവർ പറയത്തില്ല, കാരണം they are able to withstand, they still feel energetic, they feel that okay fine, I'm a little bit breathless, എൻ്റെ ഓക്സിജൻ ലെവലൊക്കെ ഓക്കെയാ, ഞാൻ ഇച്ചിരി ബ്രെത്ത്ലെസ്സാ, അത് കുഴപ്പമില്ല, ഐ ക്യാൻ മാനേജ്. അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു ടെൻഡൻസി. അപ്പം അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു ടെൻഡൻസി എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് എസ്പെഷ്യലി എൽഡർലിക്കാരിലെ യങ്ങർ പോപ്പുലേഷൻ, കാരണം അവർ കുറച്ചുകൂടി ബെറ്റർ ആയിട്ട് കോപ്പ് ചെയ്യും ചില. അപ്പം യു ഹാവ് ടു ബി റിയലി കെയർഫുൾ അബൌട്ട് ഓൾ ദോസ് തിങ്സ്. ഓക്കെ, ദീസ് ആർ സം ഓഫ് ദ വാർണിംഗ് സൈൻസ്. ഇഫ് യു ആർ breathless, be very, very careful. So these are the situations where I would recommend that you should get to the hospital. You should be treated in the hospital in these circumstances, purely because we don't know the course, how this is going to turn. We don't know. When something is unpredictable, be safe. That is the most important, the message here. ഇപ്പം നമുക്കറിയാം, ഫസ്റ്റ് 5 days സെറ്റിൽ ആയില്ല എന്നറിയുമ്പം എനിക്ക് ടെമ്പറേച്ചർ ഉണ്ട്, എനിക്ക് ബോഡി പെയിൻ ഉണ്ട്, തൊണ്ടവേദനയുണ്ട്, ഓക്കെ, ആദ്യത്തെ 3-4 days സെറ്റിൽ ആയില്ല, പിന്നെയും എനിക്ക് മൈ സിംറ്റംസ് ആർ ഗെറ്റിംഗ് വേഴ്സ്, എനിക്ക് ചുമ വരുന്നുണ്ട്, ഇപ്പം എനിക്ക് ടെമ്പറേച്ചർ പിന്നെയും കൂടുന്നുണ്ടെന്ന് പറയുമ്പം ഡോണ്ട് വെയിറ്റ്. So that is not, because it's a very fine balance. A fine balance എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, it's very difficult sometimes to recognize this phase. അപ്പം ഇങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു ഫൈൻ ബാലൻസ് ഉള്ളപ്പം you have to consult your doctor. You have to make sure that you play safe here. That is very important. When I say play safe, meaning that, this is the time you should, remind, I cannot stress anymore, meaning that when I say play safe, safety is very, very important, and don't take any risk. I know that, നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ ഹോസ്പിറ്റൽ ബെഡിലെന്ന് പറയുന്നു, ഹോസ്പിറ്റലിൽ എവിടെയാണെങ്കിലും ഇപ്പോൾ I know it's very unprecedented, it's very difficult situation, but the recommendation, I have to give you the gold standard recommendation. The gold standard recommendation is that if you have continued, if you are breathless, okay, there is a and if there is a bed available, and bed availability എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് എപ്പോഴും എല്ലായിടത്തും ഇല്ല ഇപ്പം, that is a problem, you see. But the recommendation cannot be based on limitations of resources. So recommendations has to be based on evidence. Recommendations has to be based on the risk benefit balance. So based on all those things, this is what we normally recommend. So if you are, so what are the situations where we would recommend hospital help or help from the healthcare professional at the bare minimum, okay? So you can turn the corner. Most of the people sometimes can't do this. And if you look at, we would recommend that you have an early hospital admission, get supportive measures. Saturations koraju. Then there is a lot of evidence that adequate maintenance of oxygen helps, because oxygen is very important to maintain your energy, maintain the function, healthy function of all your body tissues. You need oxygen. The supportive measures. There are a lot of trials going on. There are a lot of trials that have shown that dexamethasone steroids are helpful, anticoagulation in when you give heparin, or blood thinners are very useful to try and minimize clot formation, because I'll show you next slide as to what happens and why these treatments are important. Intravenous remdesivir is very important. So these are all standard treatments that we give. Then once you are in the hospital, then when you give steroids, steroids and side effects on the steroids has to be given very closely monitoring your blood sugar levels, because it can boost your blood sugar very highly. It has to be closely monitored. It has to be controlled appropriately to have a good outcome. So steroid is not given in the first phase of the disease. When you have a high viral load, steroid it makes the situation worse. The steroid is only given when we think that a person is moving from an initial phase, from the first phase to a phase where there is a risk of danger. There is a risk of danger, and we know that there is some evidence that this person has got evidence of damage to the airways. There is an evidence that there is inflammation or infiltration in your lungs. And so that, these, in which circumstances we know that the steroid is going to be beneficial, but, keeping a very close eye on several factors, including blood glucose, your blood pressure, so on and so forth. So it's very important to keep a close eye on that. And all the medical professionals know that, and it's normally given in the hospital, and they keep a very close eye. It's all well, it's a very well known drug, and it's been there for several years, and we know it works. Okay, blood thinners. Why it's very important is because pneumonia in the reason why it happens is because I showed you the picture of lungs. I showed you the picture of the distal airways. I showed you the picture of how the air exchanges. And air exchange happens between the small distal parts of your alveoli and the small capillaries, which is embedded in the alveoli. Air exchange happens. What happens when you go into a dangerous phase, or when you go into this catastrophic phase, is that the body immune mechanism will start to fight against you. When you have a high sudden release of your antibodies, it unfortunately fights against you at that time. So what will happen is some of these chemicals released as a result of this in a defense mechanism will then go and attack this little small capillaries in the lungs, and it damages the capillaries in the lungs. And what happens is the capillaries, the small blood vessels that is in the lungs will bleed. I'll show you a picture in my next slide. It will start to bleed, and it will develop clot within the lungs, and then you get the lot of inflammatory exudates in the brain, the fluid that comes out because of an active inflammation, or I don't know how to say that in Malayalam, but essentially I'll show that in the next video. Is that so? If you look at here, So you may remember that I showed you this picture right in the beginning. So look at what's happening here. So what happens is that when you go into the dangerous phase, so what happens is that the little blood vessels here and the lining of the little airways, which is called as alveole, will start to break up. And that just not only happens in the lungs, but also in the rest of the body, like in different parts, all the blood vessels will start to become leaky. We'll know that, they feel like they are more edematous, more fluid in the body. Your lungs will start building up this sort of fluid along with, release of blood clots and everything. So essentially your whole lungs is filled with this, this fluids, okay, and with the release of blood and what you call as little clots associated with the little clots. So this is a very it depends on how much of your lungs is involved. It becomes you go from a dangerous phase to a catastrophic phase where if you have, say, more than more than 80% of your lungs involved, it's going to be very difficult because you're already going to be in the ventilator, but then you also have other difficulties in coming out of the ventilator. And most of the time, when you go into that phase where your most of the regions of the lungs is totally inflamed by this sort of reaction that happens in COVID, then what happens here is that where this is what you call a cytokine storm. So what you see here, it suddenly just breaks, the cytokine, the chemicals that is released as a result of the sudden immune response just goes all over to your lungs. Okay. And that is why the death of COVID, if you see that people say that I'm on oxygen, I'm feeling okay today, but then tomorrow you see that, oh, he's on a ventilator. How did that happen from being just on oxygen to just on a ventilator within a matter of 24 hours? That is a reason. So you see how it actually showers all the chemicals into your lungs, and then your lungs is then completely filled with fluid. It's completely filled with little clots. So the air exchange doesn't happen anymore. So the ventilation, if you put on a ventilator, it becomes depending on the extent of your damage. For example, this is your normal lungs. This is what happens. Your normal lungs will look. ഇങ്ങനെ നമ്മൾ ഒരു എക്സ്റേ എടുത്ത് നോക്കുവാണെങ്കിൽ നോർമലായിട്ട് ഒരാളുടെ എക്സ്റേ എടുക്കുക, ലങ്സിന് പ്രോബ്ലം ഒന്നും ഇല്ലാത്ത ഒരാൾക്ക് എക്സ്റേ എടുക്കുവാണെന്നെങ്കിൽ, so this is what the x-ray will look at how clean your lungs is. There's no problems in your lungs. So what happens when I say ARDS, that is what happens in COVID. So that's what happens in COVID. Look at this. So this is an extreme case. Okay, this is an extreme case where the patient had florid we call it pneumonia in his lungs. You can see that. So why this happens? It showers everywhere. In a സാധാരണ ഇപ്പോൾ ഒരു ബാക്ടീരിയൽ pneumonia, നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ pneumonia പറ്റി നമുക്ക് കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ടല്ലോ. നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ we know a lot of information about pneumonia. Pneumonia എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നമുക്ക് ഒരു കോമൺ വേർഡാണ്, നമ്മൾ നേരത്തെ കേട്ടിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. അപ്പോൾ how this COVID pneumonia is different from the standard bacterial pneumonia? Bacterial pneumonia എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് most of the time it occurs in one part of the lung. ഇപ്പോൾ ലങ്സിന്റെ ഒരു റീജിയൻ, ഇവിടെ ഇപ്പം ഒരു റീജിയനിൽ കാണത്തുള്ളൂ ബാക്ടീരിയൽ pneumonia. You take antibiotics, you find out what organism is causing the pneumonia, you take antibiotics, you recover. That'll clear off. Okay. Here the problem is that the whole lungs, it's not just affecting one part of the lung. The chemicals that is released as a result of the showering of the cytokines. Cytokines is a chemical that is released as a result of the immune response. So that when the immune response suddenly exaggerates in an uncontrolled manner, this unfortunately happens to some people, and commonly seen, not when I say common, seen mostly in people who are elderly, who have a poor immune system as a baseline, who've got other comorbidities, as I told you before, pre-existing lung conditions and all those things. So then when you go on a ventilator, so here there is no choice. You have to, the people go on a ventilator. The chances of people surviving from this state to recovery is very, very small. So that is why you see that when people go on a ventilator, even when you go on a ventilator, the problem is that, so the lungs is filled with fluid and filled with blood, clots. The ventilator will not be able to, ventilator has got the ability to push air, into the lungs. and exchange oxygen. That so when your lungs is filled with all these fluids, when your little capillaries are all filled with fluid, and when I told you that, showed you that picture where the air exchange happens, if that is completely filled with fluid and blood clots, then you cannot exchange lungs. No matter, and there's a so when you push air into distal part of the lungs, or push oxygen, I mean to say, into the distal part of those lungs, it doesn't reach that area because it's all filled with fluids. And depends on how severe the situations are. Some people manage reasonably well with the ventilator and come off because they still had air spaces where the air exchange could happen. That is where the difficulty is. That is why you see that people, when they go on the ventilator, more than 50% of the people may not survive. Okay, that is not because of that is how the disease behaves. So in the early phase, for example, pneumonia, some people got a pneumonia, mild lungs infected, oxygen saturations, 85% severe circumstances, then what we call is a non-invasive ventilation, or the CPAP and BiPAP. And so what that does is that oxygen saturation കുറയുമ്പോൾ എന്തോ സംഭവിക്കുന്ന വെച്ചാൽ നമുക്ക് നോർമലായിട്ടുള്ള ഓക്സിജൻ നമ്മുടെ അറ്റ്മോസ്ഫിയറിക് എയറിൽ most of the atmospheric air is filled with nitrogen. Yeah, so almost like 78% of the atmospheric air, നമ്മൾ സാധാരണ ശ്വസിക്കുന്ന വായുവിൽ 78% nitrogen ആണല്ലോ. Majority of it is nitrogen, and we only have very small amount of oxygen. So our oxygen is sufficient. We only have 21% oxygen in the normal air for us to breathe in. Now that is sufficient for people to lead a normal life. That is sufficient to lead a healthy life. But when you have a problem, when you have a pneumonia, when you have an infection, then what happens is that oxygen is not sufficient enough to maintain your oxygen saturation, to maintain the level of, that is why you check your oxygen saturations at home and you said, okay, my oxygen saturation is good. So that is good. So when your oxygen saturation drops down, say, and oxygen saturation 90%, that means that you need more supplemental oxygen. In addition to the normal oxygen that you have in the air, in addition, you will need some supplemental oxygen. So that is why when you go to the hospital, they give you oxygen just by giving a mask. And for some people, that oxygen, even if you're 10 liters or 15 liter maximum oxygen കൊടുത്തെങ്കിൽ തന്നെ അവർക്ക് adequate oxygen level maintain ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല. കാരണം is because your pneumonia, the amount of damage to the lungs is to the extent that you need some more support. What we do is we give what we call as non-invasive ventilation. That means that in addition to the oxygen, we also give an extra support so that to push the air, to push the oxygen to the best as we can to reach into the lungs, so that the oxygen reaches into that small blood capillaries and that area of the lungs that I've showed you, so that the air exchange can happen. Okay, and most of the people, okay, they do well with this non-invasive ventilation, CPAP, the extra measure. Then they, in addition to all the treatment that we give, supportive measure, all what I've just said, and then people recover. So they just recover from here, they come home, they are fine. Okay. There is, in this group of people, there is a small proportion of people, then they go on to have a ventilation by means of endotracheal intubation. They call it as invasive ventilation. Either you have to put a tube in the throat, and the tube, you are sedated, you're completely unconscious. Your breathing is fully controlled by the machine that you see here. Okay. So what happens when you go to this stage is, it is not just the lungs. Lungs is the problem. So lungs, the main problem is the lungs. Then your immunity has gone down significantly. Then your other opportunistic infection. So when everybody has got normal bacterial flora, നമ്മുടെ ദേഹത്തൊക്കെ ആണെന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നോർമലായിട്ട് തന്നെ ആൾക്കാർക്ക് ചെറിയ ബാക്ടീരിയസ് ഒക്കെ കാണും, ഓർഗാനിസംസ് കാണും. സോ ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് so when you're healthy, the normal flora remains as a normal bacteria will be a part and parcel of you. That won't do you any harm. So when your immune system is significantly compromised, when your immune system is very much down, like in situations like when you're intubated and ventilated, these sort of opportunistic, these sort of normal, otherwise normal organisms that lives in you, then takes advantage of the situation and acts against you. So now it's not only just the virus that is acting against you. Now it's also the other organisms that is otherwise that lives normally within you in your health situation. Now it takes advantage. It takes advantage. Now the organisms like bacterial infection you will get a bacterial infections, you get fungal infection, you get all different types of infections. And in addition to all those other measures that we take, sometimes your diabetes may be completely uncontrolled. In those circumstances, again, you are at high risk of developing all those infections. So it's not just one organ. So you go into what you called as a multi-system failure. So here is your heart. So the lungs is already involved, and you're very sick. There is a lot of supportive measures here. So there's a small child. There is some people going to have a stroke. Here, what you call as when you have a blood clot right into the brain, one of the main blood vessels in the brain, then you have what you call as an ischemic stroke in the stroke in the so I don't want to expand on that. So blood clot on the brain. So sometimes because നമ്മുടെ blood vessels becomes very thin and weak in these circumstances, blood vessels രക്തം supply ചെയ്യുന്ന tubes is called blood vessels so that can sometimes leak blood, so you can have a stroke as a result of that. Then your kidneys will start to fail because your kidney will lack not only just oxygen because of the lack of blood supply, because your heart has to pump, so your heart will go weak. So your heart muscle goes weak, what you call as myocarditis, meaning that your heart, instead of pumping, and allowing the blood to go everywhere in your body, it becomes weak and it stops to pump. It becomes very weak. So what happens, although we give them a lot of supportive measures to keep the blood pressure up, keep your, treat the infection. So when it comes to a stage where your blood pressure is too low, that despite giving you all those supportive measures, then what happens is that all your organs will start to fail. And if you see, that's a liver. So if you see, that's a normal liver, and this is what happens when you have your liver start to fail. So essentially what is happening here is that all the vital organs in your body will start to fail. And that is that is why people don't survive. In your lungs the ventilation becomes a problem, and your heart becomes weak, you develop stroke. So that is why it's very important to know why this disease is very devastating, why the death toll is very high, and why despite giving maximum treatment or maximum medical facility that is available, the death toll is still high. So this is actually a survival challenge. So I've just gone through the basics of what a coronavirus is and what it does, and how it primarily affects your lungs, and then it affects your rest of the body, and simultaneously affects your rest of the body. What are the phases of the disease that you should be aware of, and what are the cautions that you need to take when you need to be hospitalized. And basically it's a survival challenge, isn't it? So what I mean by survival challenge is because it is a challenging time, and how to cope with this situation is extremely difficult. As Father John Peter said, we hear a lot of different stories. We hear a lot of difficulties that people are undergoing. That is why I call it a survival challenge. And it is purely because of the unpredictable nature of the virus. It's very, very unpredictable how it behaves. And it's not only that, it's very contagious, and it's very virulent. It's not just contagious. It spreads. Once it spreads into the body, it becomes very virulent, so that it attacks the body in no time. And it has got the potential to have dangerous mutation. So mutation in the virus will change from A to B. So when it changes from A to B, and that can happen with any virus, and the B can be more dangerous than A. Okay, when it changes from B to C, it becomes so the danger, the way it mutates, it depends on how it mutates. It can become more dangerous and more virulent, and it occurs in when we have limited, then it makes you have limited access. So it occurs in a way that a very unprecedented surge. It happens very quickly to the whole community before you even become aware of it, or even before you know about it. So what happens as a result is that there is limited access to the healthcare. That is not because we don't have the resources. That's because the virus behaves in a way that it attacks everybody at the same time, and it becomes a global challenge. It becomes a huge surge that the healthcare system is unable to cope. Okay, and that is not in one place. It's all over the world. It's the same thing all over the world. So no matter how much of facility you have, how much of resources you have, so that is what we see everywhere. Okay, so and it depletes all your resources. You run out of supply, and that is again not uncommon, and that is seen everywhere. So what we tend to do, what we all do, and what we have been doing during this pandemic is that holding hands, helping each other, providing supplies, providing people with whatever they need in this difficult situation. That is what we do. And being delicate, acting sensibly is very important. And trying to pass the right message to the people is very important. And trying to review the resources in a more systematic and a more sensible way, meaning that you will have a lot of resources coming through, and you'll have a lot of information coming through. It's very important that you understand it properly. It's very important that you don't jump into conclusions, because all the treatment that we offer, all the treatment that comes to practice is based on a lot of evidence. It's based on a lot of research. It's based on a lot of guidelines. And we don't offer a treatment when we offer a treatment based on the guidelines, without based on the recommendations from a consensus, then what happens is that there is a good chance that it can go wrong. And when you base your treatment based on the consensus, opinion, guidelines, research, and evidence, and if your treatment is evidence-based, then the chances of you going wrong on your treatment becomes very slim. Very slim. So I didn't say there is no risk. There is a small risk involved with everything. Okay, so there is no you cannot do an activity. You don't. There's always a risk involved in whatever we do. So it's the same thing. Okay. Now, it is not a choice between whether you want to have the vaccine or should have the vaccine. It is a choice between vaccine versus corona. So unfortunately, the situation is that you are in a battlefield.
Excuse me, doctor.
Whether you like it or not, you are thrown into a battlefield. Okay.
Doctor, excuse me.
When you are thrown into a battlefield, you have to be fully protected. You have to do whatever you can to protect yourself. Okay. And when you're thrown into a battlefield, it is very important that you do all what you can to not only protect you, but also protect your people around and the community. So if you look at the benefits, so what can we do? How can we? So we know that the disease is devastating. We know that the disease can cause mass casualties, and we have seen that over the last 1.5 years, there are different waves of this virus, and that is typically what happens in very infectious diseases like. So that typically happens when you have a pandemic. Okay, so that is how we should look into it. So what we need to do here is that how can we break the chain? We know that we can do certain things when you have a disease. We know that we can. The healthcare system is still exploring all what is possible to try and treat COVID infection. Research going on in all parts of the world. All the researchers are fully involved in what measures can be done to try and fight an infection. Okay. Equally, there are several research, and there's already the vaccines have a rapid vaccination program took place, and then there are several vaccines. There are almost like more than 100 vaccines currently in trial at the moment, and there are fortunately at least, quite a lot of vaccines available for us. And it's now how we can stop the pandemic. The way to stop the pandemic is by breaking the chain of infection. How do we break the chain of an infection? We break the chain of an infection by several means, by social distancing, by wearing masks, and all the precautions that we already know. But the most important way that we know that we can stop the pandemic for sure is by vaccination. The reason why I say that is because we all know about vaccine. We know about the history of vaccination, and we all know that all our children, when they are born, go through different stages of vaccination schedules. And we know that if we don't have these vaccination schedules, I'm pretty sure that all നമ്മുടെ എല്ലാവരുടെയും പിള്ളേരെ എടുത്ത് നോക്കുകയാണെങ്കിൽ നമ്മുടെ എല്ലാ പിള്ളേർക്കും ഒരു വാക്സിനേഷൻ ഷെഡ്യൂൾ ഉണ്ട്. When they are born to the age of 12, to the age of 16, 19, and there is a vaccination schedule that they have to strictly adhere, they have to follow. എന്തുകൊണ്ട്? കാരണം we know that if you don't take the vaccine, the children are exposed to certain organisms that will threaten their life. And we know that if the children are not vaccinated against those primary vaccination program, we all believe that, and we all do it, and we all know it works, and we all know that the vaccination has minimized the spread of all these infections, and we all know it works. Okay, so that is one small message that I wanted to give you. But we also know that, for example, think about Spanish flu that devastated so many in the past. Think about all the other, for example, think about Ebola. Ebola was a devastating illness, yeah? And Ebola virus, so the vaccination of actually, then we know that the vaccination stopped the Ebola. We know the vaccination then gave immunity against Ebola virus for the next 10 years. So we know that the vaccination works. We know that, tetanus vaccine and tetanus varadirikkan vendi vaccine and if you have a dog bite, rabies vaccination and we know for sure that if somebody is bitten by a rabid dog, and if you vaccinate, they won't get rabies. But what if you don't vaccinate? 100% chance that you get rabies. That's നമുക്ക് അറിയാവുന്ന കാര്യമാണ് അല്ലേ? അതുകൊണ്ട് everybody vaccinates. Similarly, ഇപ്പം നമ്മൾ പിള്ളേർക്ക് പോളിയോ കൊടുക്കുന്നു, അപ്പം പോളിയോ വരാതിരിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി കൊടുക്കുന്നു, അതെല്ലാം വർക്കാവുന്ന we know that it works, and we know for sure it works. And so the benefits of a vaccine, any medication that we use, there is always a small risk involved. Anything, any work we do, there is always a small risk involved. Any activities we do, there is always a small risk involved. There is no activity in this world that we can say 100% that there is no risk involved. You drive a car in the motorway, you drive a car on the highway, there is a 1 in 1,000 chance that you can land up with an accident. Are we going to say that we are not going to drive the car anymore? We are not. So there is a balance between the benefits versus the risk. There is a balance as to what if a treatment is offered when the benefits far outweighs the risk of the treatment. If I offer a treatment to a person, if I think that the risk is much more higher in doing a procedure, then I would say that I won't do it, because the risk of doing the procedure is much more higher than the benefits. Therefore, you would be harmed. So do no harm. So that is a basis of medicine. Okay, so the risk here is far less when compared to the benefits that the vaccine can offer. It's not just about one person. It's about you, your family, your community, and the world. So it's very important that we understand this. Now, why should we vaccinate? The reason why we should vaccinate is because you can break the chain, and that is the way you make. And the history has proven us that. We need to be vigilant. We need to be aware of that. And you prevent the new variants. So the reason why the new variants occurs is because when the virus has got the ability to multiply, and it travels from one place to the other, and it mutates. It mutates. And what happens then? It becomes creates a new strain. And the new strain can be catastrophic, as we have seen. And we are seeing now. You have to protect yourself, your family, and the society from serious illness and death. And we know that the vaccines can do it. And vaccine, although it may not prevent you from having an infection, we know that vaccine you won't have a life-threatening infection. It's very, the chances of you having a life-threatening infection, I would say, sorry, I take my word back. I'm going to say that the chances of you having a life-threatening infection or a serious complication as a result of COVID is much lower. You have significant protection. Okay? So you can then return to normality, and that is what we are all looking forward. So we have gone through so much, the world has gone through so much. 1.5 years to 2 years is been a difficult time, and we know that it's not finished yet, but we are going ahead. We are heading the right track, and we are seeing success, and we know that we will succeed, and that is the hope, and that is the when you have hope, you will win. So when I tell about vaccine, I want you to be aware. Vaccine 1-2 ദിവസം കൊണ്ട് prepare ചെയ്യുന്നതല്ല. Okay? What are the principles of a vaccine? How does a vaccine work? And what is the how does it actually create an immunity? So look at this slide here. So there are different types of vaccine. പല തരത്തിലുള്ള vaccines നമ്മുടെ കയ്യിലുണ്ട്. Viral vectors എന്ന് പറയുന്നുണ്ട്, messenger RNAs ഉണ്ട്, പിന്നെ protein subunit ഉണ്ട്. These are all little portions of the virus itself and inactivated forms under, and that has been taken from the virus. And what they do, this is then injected into the human body. And what the body does is the body creates this sort of creates some harmless protein, some proteins which are harmless. It doesn't infect you, it doesn't cause you any problems. Okay? And what it does is that it then creates the copies of this protein, and this protein then has got the ability to trigger an antibody response. So what it will do, it will then, the body will recognize, okay, so I got a new protein that is in my blood, so let me create some antibodies, and let me create some trigger the immune system so that my fighting mechanism is built up. So I'm particularly then the immune response is such that the memory, we call in medical terms memory T cells, the B lymphocytes, these are all primed to recognize this particular virus. Okay? And this particular, when for example, when you have this particular infection, what the body is already prepared. Okay? You're already prepared. If you're already prepared, then you will succeed. If you're already prepared, then you'll do the job well. If you're not prepared, then you are not, you will then have to struggle hard to do the job well. Now here you're already prepared. Your body is ready to fight. So the antibodies are there. Okay? So that is what the vaccine does. So vaccine primes your body and keeps you ready. If in case you have an infection, you have the ability to fight back. You have your immune system healthy, and you had your, I'm not saying that you have your immune system ready to prepared to fight for the infection.
Sanoja, Philip ആണ്.
Yeah.
നമുക്ക് ഒരു 20 minutes കൂടെയാണ് ഉള്ളത്. We have 20 minutes more. അപ്പോ നമുക്ക് സ്ലൈഡ്സ് കുറച്ചുണ്ട്, ബട്ട് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു കുറച്ച് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ആൾക്കാർക്കുണ്ട്. So when you clarify those questions, the remaining portions can be connected.
Sure. I'll try and finish off this quickly, okay?
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
I'll finish in 10 minutes, hopefully. So so there's a different phases. Stage in a vaccine preparation is very important. There are different stages of vaccine preparation. It goes through a preclinical trial. Can you hear me?
Yes,
It
doctor.
goes through a pre.
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me? Okay,
Yes,
so the
doctor.
vaccine goes through a preclinical trial. The preclinical trial is done in animal models, where you try and test the vaccine first in animal models to make sure that the vaccine is safe and has got the effect. And then you go to phase one trial, where what you do is you just test the vaccine with 20 to 100 people, and then it goes to, if it's successful there, then you go to phase 2 and then to phase 3, which is a large scale trial. When the phase 3 trial becomes successful and we know that the vaccine is effective, then we go on to distributing the vaccine to the community. And this stage normally takes several months, and it's been closely scrutinized by the vaccine-related biological, advisory committee, the advisory committee on immunological practice, so on and so forth. So due to time limitations, I'm going to go on through the slide very quickly. So this is what the normal vaccines, the vaccines that we hear commonly. There are several vaccines available, Covax, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, Covishield. Sputnik is coming in India soon. Moderna, Pfizer. So if you look at the some of the safety profiles, so if you look at the efficacy, so the Pfizer, Moderna's, have shown about close 94 to 95% efficacy. The Covishield in India is about 90% and has got 90% protective effect after the second dose. But if you look at some of the adverse event, the serious adverse event that is seen in AstraZeneca Covishield is that there is a small tendency to develop blood clot, and the tendency for that is about 1 in 100,000. So still very rare, and we don't see that in Pfizer or Moderna or with the Covaxin. And there's a small chance that people can develop allergic reaction to the vaccine. Let me move on to the next slide. These are the common things that you see when you get a vaccine. So you develop headache, fever, muscle pain, temperature. There's some pain at the site of injection. That's a very common things that will settle down. That will happen with any vaccine. Those are not adverse events. Those are all just side effects that will just settle down very quickly. And then what I wanted to reassure you is that the COVID vaccine does not contain any egg, gelatin, preservatives, or latex. If you're allergic to egg, you can still have it. The only contraindication at the moment is that if you have had a severe allergic reaction to a vaccine from before, or if you had an allergic reaction after the first dose, then you should not have it. Then rest of them are all like precautions that should take. So this is something that I would wanted to tell you very briefly. So one of the complications that you all are feared about is the formation of clot with AstraZeneca Covishield. The risk of that is about 1 in 100,000, and is primarily seen in women under the age of 55, but there are case reported in men as well. So the National Advisory Committee currently recommends that not to offer for adults under the age of 55. That may vary with different country based on the availability of the vaccine and also based on the recommendations locally. So I'll just quickly go through the vaccine here. The total amount of vaccine, about 1.59 billion people have been vaccinated, but the trend is going up very quickly. It's ramping up. Vaccination schedules are different in different countries. I just wanted to show you how countries lead by example. So you got Israel, you got Chile, you got the United States and the United Kingdom. They all lead by example. More than 50% of the population is now being vaccinated, which is good news. And we are seeing a positive trend. That is even good news, meaning that the countries which has been vaccinated, they're gradually getting into a phase of normality. That is very important for you to know. And here, as we know that Canada and India is also ramping up with the vaccines, and what is available is Covishield and Covaxin, and we all know about the Covishield and Covaxin. But I can answer any of your questions when it comes to the question rounds. So Sputnik V is going to be available soon. India is going to manufacture Sputnik V. This is a Russian vaccine prepared from cold virus. You have to take it in two shots at 21 days apart. Very good efficacy. There is no reported side effects of clot. Similar to Covaxin, there's not been any reported side effects of clot. So there are availability of vaccines, and it's going to come soon. So should I vaccinate if I have COVID? Yes, answer is the natural immunity of your COVID-19 infection will last only for 6 months. For example, if you had COVID, and then how long will my immunity last if I had an infection? According to the current research, all what we know is that if you have COVID, your immune status, you will have antibodies for about 6 months. And the research is still ongoing about the immune period of the vaccine. What happens if you take a vaccine? But the current study says that if you have a vaccine, then you can offer comes when a question of these type of questions arises when there is a need for rapid rationing of vaccines to make sure that the vaccine becomes available to the population as best as we can, because the vaccination need to go up rapidly to have that benefit. So we don't have any, the evidence is limited at the moment. So, but the initial trials, the Co-Vac trial from Spain has been, have shown that there is no significant difference if you combine vaccine, that it is still effective and safe. There is another trial done in England at the moment, the results of which have not been published yet. But overall, things are positive. But if you have an option, just stick with one vaccine. But now to conclude, dear audience, that the COVID-19 pandemic infection has been devastating, and the mutation and variants has been a global challenge. It's not something that has been in one place, it's been there everywhere. And several preventive measures are in place at the moment. Several ongoing trials are here. We have got a lot of positive impact. There are still ongoing trials, and that will continue. And vaccination is ramping up, and we have seen good promising results with positive effect in countries which is almost like more than 50% vaccinated. And vaccine is the way out of this pandemic. I have no doubt that the pandemic will come to an end soon. So no life is safe unless everyone is safe. And I know that we are going through a very dark period at this point of time, and I have to, we have to be hopeful. And as we all know, there is always light at the end of the tunnel. I would like to thank His Beatitude more and more Basilius Cardinal Clemens Catholicus for his blessings. His Grace Bishop Dr. Joshua Marignatius for being my mentor, my inspiration right from my young age and throughout. I would like to thank His Grace Bishop Dr. Thomas Mar Antonius. I'll thank Dr. Father Philip Pulipara and Father Monsi Kalikal. I'd also like to thank Father John Peter and all other Reverend Fathers who has joined me today. A special thanks to Mr. Jose, Mr. Aji Matthew, and Mr. Andrew Simon for arranging this. A heads up to the Malangara Catholic Youth Movement in Padi. And I would like to extend my gratitude to my teachers and my friends at Sacred Heart School and Mar Gregorius College. And I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all my family members and friends. Thank you so much for listening. And I'm very happy to take some questions. So off to you.
Yeah. Hi, Doctor. Are you able to listen?
I'm able to listen, yes.
Yeah, hi, Doctor. So I'm Thomas. I'm from the MCYM group. So I have few doubts regarding, so like, why should we take 2 doses of vaccination, and also which is the best vaccine you suggest here in India?
Okay, the reason why we take 2 doses of vaccination is because, very good question. Thank you for asking. So we know that from the clinical trials that we know that, when we take the first dose, you acquire a level of immunity. You don't get 90% protection after the first dose. So when you take the first dose, what happens is that your immune status is stimulated to an extent. For example, say in Covishield, say would say 70%, and then once you take the second dose, that is when your immune status. The vaccines are designed and prepared in a way that you have to have a booster dose after a recommended period of time to boost your immunity, to give you that level of protection of 90% of whatever the companies say, whatever the manufacturer says. For example, for Pfizer, you get 95% protection after the second dose. And so the booster dose is a way to try and enhance your immune system, which has already been enhanced by the first dose. So according to the recommendation, apart from few vaccines, they just say one vaccine. It's how it's been prepared to boost your immune system. And,
okay, doctor. Also, does like the vaccine cause changes in the nervous system?
So the short answer is no. So the nervous system or any of our bodies are all so when I say nervous system, it depends on what you mean by nervous system. For example, there are certain vaccines have shown that if you take a vaccine, some people develop a lack of some people's memory goes down a little bit, and if you see as there are some side effects that has already been reported in certain vaccinations, that your memory goes down. You can have people can have clots forming anywhere in the body. It can be in your heart, it can be in your brain, it can be in small veins in your brain. So you have to be cautious about it. So the answer is that vaccine as a side effect for some people, it has been cautioned that if you see that if you develop confusion, if you see that you have your memory goes down with a vaccination, that is seen probably in certain vaccinations with certain manufacturers where the risk of clot is high, and not seen generally in any vaccines. But as a matter of caution, if you see that after a vaccination, if you notice that if somebody has been confused or somebody has been have abnormal behavior of your neurological system, then that is time to take caution. So do not go for the second dose. Then you have to seek medical attention before you go embark on a second dose.
Okay, doctor. Thank you.
Hi, doctor. Myself, I'm Divya.
Hi, Divya.
Patients are undergoing like injection heparin, whether they can take co-vaccine or co-shield vaccination, because they are underwent a valvular replacement, so they are undergoing injection heparin. So whether they can take any vaccines.
So the general recommendations about the vaccine is that, so if you look at the contraindications, meaning that the people who cannot take vaccination, so the people who are already on a blood thinner doesn't come under that list. So if you're on a blood thinner, so if you're already on a blood thinner, then there's a small risk that you can have at the site of injection. It depends on how much your blood is thin. You can have a small risk of developing what you call as a hematoma, meaning that injection it's an intramuscular injection, but it's with a very fine needle, and people often tolerate it very well. And generally, there is no contraindications for vaccinations, especially if you're on a blood thinner. So that means that you can have vaccination, and it doesn't cause you any serious harm.
And doctor, can you explain me the supine and prone positions?
Okay.
Because
yes,
in India, they are more importance to the prone position for COVID patients, but the patients not understanding the what is the real matter in the prone position. So can you explain me between the supine and prone position for everyone?
Very, very good question.
Thank you.
So it's a very good question. Thank you so much. And the reason why it's so basically with COVID, what it primarily affects the lungs, as I told you. And we know that when people have infiltrations in the lungs, and when you have fluid in the lungs, or mainly infiltrations in the lungs, what will happen is that your breathing is much more what matters is the amount of oxygen, amount of air that you breathe that goes into your lungs and into your distal alveoli for a proper exchange of oxygen. So there are a lot of evidence that if you are in a prone position, the way the mechanism, that the ability to take the breath all the way in and to deliver the amount of air to the distal tissues of your lungs, and to maximize the air exchange, the prone position is thought to be better than the supine position. So to make it clear, prone position എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നമ്മൾ കമത്തി കിടക്കുന്നത്, supine position എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് നമ്മൾ what you call മലന്ന് കിടക്കുന്നത് അല്ലേ. So look when you lie down looking with the face up. So prone position has got the benefit of allowing or being able, giving you that ability to make your mechanism of breathing much more enhance the ability to try and improve your oxygen exchange and breathing breathing itself.
Thank you, doctor.
Excuse me, doctor.
Yeah.
Myself, Lippy. So I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So the first question that I want to ask you is, people who had been affected with COVID and had been recovered. So some people, they get to after getting negative result, they get to have this constant headache, and people who had already having wheezing and all, they get to have this wheezing and all, and they say this is a post-COVID effect. Is that a true or is it a myth?
Okay, so it's a good question. So for any forms of infection, or if you have a viral infection, no matter what the viral infection is, there is always an after effect for some people. Okay, it depends on the level of infection that you had. It depends upon how sick you are when you had COVID. It depends upon how much of your involvement of your lungs that you had, and also other organs that has been involved when you had the infection. So it is not uncommon, put it this way, it is not uncommon for people to find that they are feeling more tired and lethargic because they are still recovering. Some people, what we call as post viral, there's a period where people go into a phase where they have general body pain, myalgia, headache. Those are all not uncommon. And your second question was about people, can they still have cough and breathlessness? Yes, we know that from evidence that when you have infiltration, again, it depends on the level of infiltration that you have in your lungs. You know that the recovery phase can be although you have recovered, the lungs takes time to recover. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that it's actually a slow process of recovery after you come out of the hospital. So you have come out of the danger phase, but then there's a small process of recovery, and in that small process of recovery, you can have, depending upon what level of extent that you have had the infection, you will find that most of the people, they recover very quickly, and most of the people who had severe, some other people have severe infection, they have that phase that they have to go through, is at a phase where they have the recovery phase is going to be slow, in which case they can be a little bit breathless, but over time. But there are also evidence that when people have significant infiltration or pneumonia in the lungs, they're left with some scarring in the lungs. So when they have scarring in the lungs, then they may not have their lungs may not recover. In most of the types of scarrings that we have, your lungs may not recover completely back to normal. So if you have had a normal breathing before, if you have a significant infection that you are recovered from, and if you had a scarring as a result of it, then you will see that some people are more breathless than others.
Yes, doctor. Thank you. I have another question. People who take vaccine, like they take 2 doses of the vaccine, but still they are affected with COVID. Then how is this vaccine preventing this infection, doctor?
Okay, that's again a very good question. So the vaccine is meant to, the importance of vaccine is that the two. Okay, one thing is that when you give the vaccine doesn't stop you from getting infected. Okay, what it stops is that when you get in case you get an infection after you had the vaccine, then you have an inbuilt, the people who are vaccinated have got an inbuilt immune system. Your immune system is already prepared for the virus. The immune system is already prepared to fight for the virus. So the vaccine has shown that the vaccine has got the ability to stop or minimize the risk of, or the death or devastating complication as a result of COVID-19 by significant proportion. Say 95% of the people, who are, if you're vaccinated, you have a 95% chance that you won't have a serious infection as a result of COVID. There's a 95% chance that the vaccine protects you from death. So that is the important thing here. And then what happens is that when in addition to all other measures that you take, you actually break the cycle. So virus becomes less virulent. So the reason why the virus is more, more virulent, why it's more mutating, is because when your immune system is low, then what happens is the virus has got the ability to replicate very quickly, and then it transmits from one person to another. If you have a strong immune system, the virus then dies. Although you can still infect another person. That is why we say that you should still maintain all the necessary precautions. Have the face mask, social distance, even if you're vaccinated. That's because you still can transmit infection to a person who's not vaccinated, or in those circumstances it can be devastating for the other person, although the person who's already vaccinated has been protected from a devastating complication as a result of the COVID.
Doctor, can you stop sharing your screen so that we can see you in full screen as well?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Doctor, we came across few questions on YouTube.
Yeah.
The question is from Sebastian. The question is, when can a COVID recovered patient go for a vaccination?
Okay, so the recommendation based on the National Vaccination Committee and the guidelines currently recommend that as soon as you test negative, and generally they said about 4 weeks after you had a COVID infection, you can get vaccinated. And as I mentioned to you before, the natural immunity of a COVID infection only lasts for about 6 months, according to the National Vaccine research protocol, or the committee advises that as soon as you test negative, then you can be vaccinated. The only reason why you should not vaccinate is when you have an ongoing temperature, if you have ongoing fever, if you are still tested positive, then you should not vaccinate. But once you recover and once you're tested negative, then ideally they say that about in 4 weeks time you should be okay to vaccinate.
Doctor, this is Father John Peter. Am I audible?
Yes, Father John Peter, yes.
This is not a question, but to add to one of your answer regarding taking blood thinners. In fact, I have a stent. I had been taking blood thinner for 1.5 years, and I consulted my doctor. He told me, stop taking blood thinner alone for 4 days. Then go for vaccination. The next day itself, you can continue your blood thinner, just for your information.
Thank you very much for that comment. It depends on what, again, here, what you're looking at is that what are the, so for example, if you had a stent implanted within the first, imagine that if you had a stent implanted in about, say, 12 months time, we normally recommend to continue on the, blood thinner is different. So you're talking about the antiplatelet therapy. You're talking about aspirin and Plavix slides blood thinner, but has a different effect, what we call as antiplatelet effect. So that has got the ability to minimize the risk of clotting of the stents. So for example, if somebody had a stent implanted, say 3 months ago, or 1 month ago, or within the 12 months, we normally recommend keeping on the blood, antiplatelet like aspirin and clopidogrel, which are considered as a blood thinner, but the mechanism of action is different. We call it as antiplatelet, purely because the risk of clotting the stent by stopping the those antiplatelet therapy at that time is higher. If you are past 1 year, if you say after 12 months of having implanted the stent, then the safety margin is quite high. You can stop your blood thinner, and then you can then go on to stopping the blood thinner is not going to be a problem, because then your stent is already very well healed, and the healing process is within your blood vessel is complete. Now, there are certain circumstances you won't be able to stop the blood thinner. For example, if you have a mechanical valve, so meaning that mechanical valve, when I say mechanical valve, that means if you have a metal valve, so people are on blood thinners called Coumadin. So Coumadin or warfarin, and certain level of iron, what you call this international normalized ratio, which is called the level of how much the blood need to be thin to minimize the risk of clot within the valve is important. So in those people who are on warfarin and who's got a metal valve, then it is not advisable to stop the stop the blood thinner, stop the anticoagulation, purely because when I say anticoagulation, that means blood thinner is purely because if you stop the blood thinner to the point where your blood is thick, then that will risk the formation of clot in the valve. That will clot the valve, and that can be a life-threatening complication for the person. So it depends on what type of blood thinner. It depends on why you're taking blood thinner. If you're anxious about, some people are on blood thinner purely for minimizing the risk of, for example, if you have an atrial fibrillation, if it's an arrhythmia that comes from the top chamber of the heart, that that has got a small risk of stroke. If the based on the risk profile, risk benefit modification, and we can always recommend. But the if you're on the blood thinner, if you take if you take the vaccine, there's a small risk that you can have a what you call as a swelling at the site of bleeding of the injection. The amount of the vaccine is very, very small, like you only give 0.5 ml. But it's a very good question generated by the audience, and we have not seen any problems as such as a result of it. And we have not actually routinely recommended people stopping any blood thinners for the purpose of vaccination, because we know that sometimes stopping certain things can be detrimental for, that is, again, it has to be, if you decide to do, if a healthcare professional decides to do it, it has to be on a case-by-case basis. So you have to really weigh what would be the risk if I stop a blood thinner. And so as I just told you, that it has to be a case-by-case basis, and it has to be reviewed as an individual case, and then make the decision if you are keen to discontinue. But the general recommendation, we have not seen any problem here as a result of it. We normally don't recommend people to stop any blood thinners. But we, for example, if somebody has got a mechanical valve, if their international normalized ratio INR is slightly is within normal range, we still give them offer them the vaccine, and there's a small chance that you can have a hematoma or at the site of injection. It will take time for that swelling to heal, but it's not a big problem.
Thank you, Doctor. You are really wonderful, perfect both in presentation as well as in explanations. God bless you, Doctor.
Thank you.
And now we shall have 3 more questions, like 3 more questions. So please.
Can I express my doubts, sir?
Yes, please.
Good evening. I'm Indu from Agricultural College. I just wanted to know, we have taken the first vaccination, then the person has got corona. But later on, whether is it necessary for a person to take the second shot? Because he might have got a lot of medication, no? Is it necessary?
You mean to say if you had vaccinated first dose,
yes,
and then whether you have to take the second dose or not? Is that what your question is about?
In the meantime, the person has already affected with corona, but he has not taken his second shot. So now he might have gone through a lot of medications. No, is it necessary for the second shot?
So it's a very I've not come across such a difficult, very challenging question to answer. But let me put it this way: so when you had the initially you had the COVID vaccine, and then you have an infection. So when you have an infection, when you have recovered from an infection, then if you look at the the advice, and if you look at the recommendations from all the guidelines, and what is we have to look this in 2 different angles. One is that when you have an infection, so when you have a first dose of of vaccine, so you will have, say, imagine if you have, I'm not going to say which vaccine you're taking. So if you have a first dose of vaccine, and imagine that you have, say, 50% protection, 50% protection against acquiring a COVID. That doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have COVID. So you're still at risk of having a COVID. But I mean to say, when I say COVID, I mean to say that you're still at risk of having COVID no matter whether you're vaccinated, but it's mainly the devastating complications of vaccine. The risk of you dying as a result of COVID is much low, and the risk of you dying, having a serious complication as a result of COVID is much low, because your immune system is boosted to respond appropriately at the right time. So after you had the first dose of vaccination, there is a certain level of protection to minimize this deadly complication of the virus. So we know that the level of protection is, say 60% or whatever the guideline says. When you have a COVID infection, what we know from the from previous research and what we know from the guidelines is that, and also from the special vaccine committee guidelines, is that your protection level after, as I told you in my previous slide, your protection level, you are protected from your natural immunity, or from it's about, we don't know the duration of protections. They say that probably up to 6 months. And then after 6 months, your level of protection is not as adequate as required to minimize the risk of you having a devastating complication as a result of COVID. So there are still reasons. So whether you will have, whether you will add that immune response that you had from antibody response that you had from COVID infection to the antibody response to your vaccination, meaning that would you able to add those both together and be more protected, studies are still going. So there are still ongoing studies that if you have a COVID infection, can you just have one dose of COVID vaccination? So do you have enough antibodies in your blood to protect you from a further devastating complication as a result of COVID? So there are still studies going on. So I don't have a clear answer for it, but my assumption is that, the further research will give you that, will make it more apparent, will make it more clear as to what would be the outcome of people who already had a COVID infection or who already had a vaccination and then had a COVID infection. But the recommendation at this point of time is, is that the recommendation is that your protection level is to 95% or 90%, or to what the company says base is only when you have the second dose. So I can only answer so much to that question, but time will give you more answers about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello?
Any further questions? Doctor, there was a question like AstraZeneca, it's not recommended below 55. It's looked little scary. So, any particular reason?
So the main reason it varies in different countries, and it depends on the main reason about AstraZeneca Covishield is there's a small risk, 1 in 100,000 risk of having a clot, and that has been closely looked at by the vaccine advisory committee and closely scrutinized by the relevant bodies. So risk is, at the moment, the risk is 1 in 100,000. And that is still considered a substantially low risk when compared to the benefits that the vaccine offers. So that is the answer for it. And the risk of clots has not been seen in most of the other vaccines, like, for example, Pfizer or Moderna or Covaxin or Sputnik has not seen that, seen that sort of side effect. So So if you ask me that okay, the risk is very small, do I still need to consider it based on the recommendations? That is why it's still in the guidelines. But every life is important, every complications are important, and every life is important for them and their family. If it's available, it depends on the feasibility and availability. In some countries, here, for example, in Canada, US, we got Pfizer, we got Moderna, and the risk of clots has not been reported in these two vaccinations. Sputnik is arriving, Covaxin is already there, and the risk of clots has not been reported in those sort of vaccination. But in any vaccines, there is a small risk of what I call as allergic reaction. That is something that we need to look for, but it's very rare again. But given the benefits, the risk is far low.
Thanks, doctor. So some insights on the black fungus.
Come again?
Some insights on that black fungus and white fungus, which is now it's reported in recently, right?
Yeah. So basically, what happened that is what we call as an opportunistic infection. When I say opportunistic infection, what it means is that when you are healthy, when your immune system is good, then these sort of organisms that normally lives in say a contaminated place, or if it lives in a place where it normally doesn't affect you because the immune system is so good so that it doesn't allow those infections to get into your body. So when your immune system is so devastated as a result of the infection, and what happens is that then those organisms which are known to be safe then become dangerous. So what happens is that these fungus or other forms of like bacteria that normally lives in your body then becomes dangerous. Then they take advantage of your situation. They take advantage of your weak immunity, and they then grow in you. So what happens in those circumstances is that then they become very stronger. And these sort of infections, when happens, especially a fungal infection, when it happens in a person who is immunocompromised. When I say immunocompromised, meaning that when your immunity is low, then that can be very, very dangerous. And you have to then fight against infection. And most of sometimes you cannot be successful. And we see that in quite a few cases. But that's again not seen everywhere. Seen in some selected places. So that is a concern.
Sir?
Yes, please. So just before Simon, just coming back to one of the questions that one of you guys asked before about the timing of vaccination after having a COVID infection. Okay, so let me clarify two more things. It's very important. If you have had a coronavirus infection, and if you have not received, this is very important. If you have received immunoglobulins, for example, that is one of the treatments that has been given for COVID. So if you have received immunoglobulins, then they recommend waiting for I think it's roughly about I can't remember the exact time, but there's a time limit, at least 3 months or 2 to 3 months, something like that, to before you have the vaccine. But otherwise, you can have it. So there are certain immunoglobulins that we give. This part of immunoglobulins is part of treatment for people who has got severe COVID. So it depends on what you have had at the time of COVID infection. If you just had a COVID infection and you just come out of if you've not been hospitalized, and if you had a reasonable good recovery, and if you've not had certain drugs like immunoglobulins, then your vaccination after COVID, could be, a recommendation is that as soon as you test negative, or in about 4 weeks.
Yeah, it seems there are lots of questions for the participants. I think we shall have 2 more questions, please. And if you have more questions, just write to us, and we shall send it to Dr. Sanoj, and he'll send the answer, and we shall give back to you. So 2 more questions, please.
So hi, doctor. So this question is from Shirley Baiju.
Hi,
So
Shirley.
even after recovering from COVID, do we need to continue the prone position?
Come again?
Even after recovering from COVID, do we need to continue the prone position?
I don't think so. There is no evidence to support that.
All right, doctor. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Doctor,
Yeah.
this is Nisha.
Hi, Nisha.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you nicely.
Doctor, my question is, in news we could see that people are standing in a long queue for getting Ayurvedic or homeopathy-based medicine for COVID. So from initial stage, is it better to go for allopathy or Ayurvedic or homeopathy? Which will actually save lives rather than making COVID infection worse?
So, very good question. Thank you for asking. And as I told you before, I have a lot of respect and respect to all healthcare professionals in all different domains, including Ayurvedam, Siddha, and all other. I don't know about how Ayurvedam or Siddha works, but I do respect their views. And when I don't know about Ayurvedam or Siddha, I cannot unfortunately comment on their way of dealing with things. But what is very important and what we all know is that ultimately the bottom line is that we all follow a healthy lifestyle and we follow all necessary, important measures, stay healthy, and how we can, maintain your health by means of natural measures is very important. Take all the natural measures that has been recommended that would boost your immunity. I have no hesitations in recommending that. In fact, I actually recommend that, for example, doing yoga, doing regular exercise, and taking the vitamin supplements, and taking all the certain natural, say naturopathy, all helps in terms of boosting and improving your level of immunity. That is one. Keep it on one side. The important aspect here to know is that we have to know what our limitations are. So that is what we need to understand. So it's not about allopathy, it's not about Ayurvedam, it's not about homeopathy. It's about what are our limitations. The success of medicine is not about what we know. The success of medicine is what we don't know and how we react and what measures we take to try and understand the unknown. And to be honest, and there are certain things that we don't know, and there are certain things that we don't know that we are still learning, and that learning process is very important. In that learning process, we are bound to make some small errors, but that is why that we have all the system in place to look at it very closely, to look at it, to scrutinize all what we do, and that is how the healthcare system works, no matter what domain you're working with. Now, if you ask me, should I take, will any medications change the course of a disease? The answer is that at this point of time, all what we know is that, if you have a healthy immune system, then you have a good chance that you will belong to that 80% of the population who actually do well and don't go on to the dangerous phase of the COVID. So what we don't know is that who in that 20% of the population who goes into that dangerous phase gets into the catastrophic phase where you then unfortunately come to COVID. Now, in those, so anything that we can do to, healthy lifestyle, stop smoking, we know that will help. We know that, stop, reducing them. Don't drink excess alcohol. We know that, treating your underlying conditions, if you have diabetes or high blood pressure or any other underlying medical conditions, we know that, dealing with that appropriately, dealing with that diligently, dealing with that, not just saying that I got diabetes, I'm on this medication, but that's not helping. No, how well you treat your diabetes, how well you may keep your health well, by other measures. It could be anything, that can keep your body healthy. So all those measures should be taken into consideration. And then I think that is all very important. But I don't know whether, but what I would emphasize, or what I would insist, is that we should be very vigilant about what comes through the media. We should keep your eyes open. And as I told you before, if you go, so whatever you do in the form of natural way, whatever you do, like for example, exercise or natural medicines and things like that, it's all going to help you. Everything is going to help you. And steam inhalation, for example, that's not going to harm you. That's going to help you. Taking good, healthy food, healthy diet, exercise regularly, that's all going to help you. So all that measures are recommended and advised. And our practice is always, as a medical professional, I have to practice based on evidence, and based on evidence base, meaning that if I offer a treatment based on what evidence I have to the best of my ability, then the treatment becomes more successful. And the chances of you making a mistake, the chances of having a complication as a result of the treatment becomes much less.
Yeah, so one more question. If you have more questions, please mail your chennai.mcym.party@gmail.com. Last and final question.
Doctor, one more question.
Yeah.
Doctor, how effective is the COVID vaccination for the people with comorbidities?
So it is as effective as anybody else. So the COVID vaccination is effective, and it's been studied in a population at different age, different ethnicity, different race. So if you look at the studies, that the trials, all the different phases of the trials, all the study, it involved the population with different ethnicity, different age group, and everybody, the effect of the vaccination is uniform. It's equivalent to everyone. And people with comorbidities are highly susceptible to COVID, and people with comorbidities are the one who takes a dangerous turn, and unfortunately doesn't do well with the COVID infection. So that is why the recommendations are, we vaccinate the high risk population first. So people with comorbidities are a high risk population. So those are the people, when I say high risk population, those are the people who are at risk of acquiring COVID and having a devastating complication as a result of COVID. So therefore, the vaccination is scheduled in a way that those populations are targeted first, and then targeted, gradually there's a phasing down of population based on populations at risk.
Thank you. Thank you. So shall we move to vote of thanks? MC?
Yes, okay, Acha.
Please.
We have come to the end of today's session. I hope everyone clarified their doubts and questions with the doctor. It was indeed a pleasure to have someone as brilliant like you, Dr. Sanoj, to dispel all our queries. Now I invite Angel Raju to propose the vote of thanks.
I, Angel Raju, on behalf of MCYM Party Chennai, would like to present a vote of thanks for this wonderful webinar where we learned so many new things which we aren't even aware of. I may like to express our sincere thanks to Dr. Sanoj Matthew Chako for giving an excellent coverage to vaccination and latest updates about it, especially things about self-limiting phase, dangerous phase, and critical phase. Just we came to know about things, and also prevent, protect, and return. We'll definitely keep this in our mind, Doctor. Thank you so much for giving such a knowledgeable webinar. I also extend my hearty thanks to Father Philip Pulipara, Father Maria Subu, Father Monsi Kalingal, Father Soju Arapaki MCYM Director, Father Stephen from Australia, Father Sebastian and Sister Nirmalya, and all other sisters. Thank you so much. I also wish to express my gratitude to Dr. Aji Matthew and party animators Ando Simon and Mrs. Shiny Jijo for their involvement and their willingness to take on the completion of tasks beyond their comfort zones. Last but not the least, I would extend my gratitude to everyone who made and are a part of this and made this webinar a great success. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angel Raju.
I would like to call respected Maria Sobu Achin for the final blessing.
Let us continue to pray to the intercession of Mother Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Let us receive the blessing. May the love of God, the grace of Lord Jesus Christ, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all now and forever. Amen. God bless you all. Good night.
God bless you. Thank you, Sanuja. Thank you so much.